Welcome, my friends, to the Quantum Shamans presented by Moshi, the Ministry of Shamanic Healing and Integration, bringing you insights into the spiritual secrets of the mind and the universe around you. We are here to help you on your spiritual journey and path of healing. And now your hosts, David and Anthony.
Welcome to Quantum Shamans presented by Moshi. I'm Anthony.
And I'm David.
And today we're here with one of our favoriteest people, Pastor Jim. Hi, Pastor Jim.
Hello.
We're so glad you're here today.
Me too.
Mr. Jim Thornton.
Yeah, we're looking forward. We usually have some pretty good conversations off camera, so today we're going to have some live right here where we're at. But before we get started, David, can you do the thing?
The Ministry of Shamanic Healing aims to help individuals heal from spiritual maladies stored as energy in the subconscious. They manifest in the form of trauma, PTSD, physical illness, mental health issues, and addiction. These practices include, but are not limited to, yoga, breathwork, meditation and mindfulness practices, Reiki, sweat lodge ceremonies, sensory deprivation, sacred plants, and any other rituals we collectively decide to establish. We hold ritual ceremonies for our community to heal collectively in a safe space, as well as individual ritual healing tailored to the members of our collective for the purpose of intensive inner work. Our most important responsibility is to help our members integrate their individual and collective experiences in order to ameliorate their spiritual maladies and spread love for the betterment of mankind. Our belief is that our collective consciousness is God. Every living organism has a purpose and is essential for homeostasis. From the single-cell organisms to the observable universe, we are all connected and equally important. We all deserve love, respect, peace, harmony, and forgiveness. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. Love conquers all.
Love conquers all. Something that hit me while you were talking was sensory deprivation. It's been a while since I've had some sensory deprivation. I think I'm going to set that up.
I want to go to that place too. Kevin keeps talking about it. I've never done it.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
I recommend it. We should go at the same time then. We can make that happen. It's pretty fun. I went a bunch of times over there in Rocky River.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been planning on going all summer long. Haven't made it yet. 'Cause I've never done it either. Something I always wanted to do.
Well, now I know what we're going to do for a field trip.
All right. Sounds good.
Field trip.
Couple
do
weeks
some breathing
to the gym. We go to sensory deprivation.
Well, you go to sensory deprivation after you go to the gym.
I was just trying to get out of the gym.
But your name's Jim. Yeah.
Relax for 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. I really enjoy it a lot.
Do you do an hour?
Yeah. Yeah, you go in there. So you kind of go in there. It's like your own room. You go in there, you take a shower. They have a shower set up right there with the pod. And you take your shower, and then you hop into the pod. And then, you can either close the top or leave the top open. Closing the top sometimes is too hot. Like, it feels really uncomfortable. Other times it's perfect if they have the temperature dialed in just right, because the whole idea is for the water, it should feel kind of warm but not hot. Just so like you feel like almost like you're floating in the womb.
Yeah, isn't it supposed to be like 98.6 degrees?
Like
sometimes it's a little hotter. What was that, Dave?
I was going to say, same as your body temperature. So it feels like nothing.
I feel like it's maybe a couple degrees warmer than body temperature. Theirs anyway. I only have experience there at True Rest. I'm sure there's other ways it's set up. And then there's a whole bunch of salt in there, so you kind of just float. And for me, when I first started doing it, I found myself terrified because I felt so vulnerable. Because you're laying there, you're naked, it's dark. There's this awareness was showing me parts of my traumatized self, where I'm afraid to be vulnerable. I felt like, oh man, I could be attacked. But then I just kind of laughed about it. I was like, but you're safe, And then I kind of let that go. I think one of the coolest experiences I had there was when I was floating. I had this awareness like I had a flagella, like a tail, like a sperm cell.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, wow, that's amazing. So I started moving it, and I'm like, this is really cool. My imagination's awesome. And thud, I hit the side of the tub. So somehow I actually moved through the awareness of my energy. And that was early in my energy awareness, and it opened something. But it was really, really cool, and I really enjoy it. I haven't been there. It's been a while since I've been there, so my current sensitivity, I haven't tried it. So sounds really fun. Yeah. I used to eat like a cannabis cookie before I'd go. I'd have a good cookie, get it rolling real nice, and hop in there. Yeah. Me and Mary used to go a bunch of times, but I'm overdue. As soon as you mentioned it, it popped up, and I was like, I think that's something we all got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally something I've always wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out about that place in Rocky River, and I've been planning on doing it all summer long, just haven't made it. So
There's a place that's opening in Times Square.
Yeah.
In New York City with float tanks, and they're doing ketamine infusions in the float.
In the float tank, I would probably try that.
Yeah.
To be honest, I would try that. That putting these modalities together sounds like lots of fun. I would try that. Sounds like fun. In Times Square, you said?
Yeah.
What a place.
Yes, right? I guess it's like huge, like several floors, and Kevin went there when he was there for New Year's Eve. And got a tour of the place.
That's really cool. Hi, Jim.
Hey.
We're glad you're here.
Me too.
What's going on, man?
I don't know. It's kind of weird sitting in the middle. I have to keep turning my head.
You won't have to.
No.
You can kind of just be here and float with us if you want. Float. There it is again.
There we go.
There it is again.
When I get back from vacation, we're floating.
Okay, good. I'm in. I'm already
Going
there.
to the Smokies?
What's that?
Going to the Smokies?
Yeah. Smoky Mountains,
Yeah.
Gatlinburg.
Yeah.
For a week.
Oh, you're going to Gatlinburg.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's called to me for a while. I haven't been there though.
Yeah, my wife and I went one time
Gonna
without
go to
kids.
Dollywood?
And no, I don't know. We'll see. I don't know
I've
what,
driven through Gatlinburg.
I don't know what we all have
I've
planned.
Spent any
But
time there.
my wife and I went before we had kids, and we just stayed up in a chalet up in the mountains, and it was gorgeous. But there's a lot of kid stuff to do, and so we were thinking about taking a trip this year. We're talking about maybe like Nashville, but then they said like Nashville doesn't really have anything for kids. So we're like, well, let's go to Gatlinburg again, and so we're gonna do that and do some stuff. They have some of those mountain coasters, where you sit on the car and you kind of go through the mountain. You can kind of control your speed. So
cool.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. So a lot of activities planned.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be a good time.
Yeah. I just want to get out there and be with the mountains.
Right. Yeah.
Be in the misty mountains. I love me some mountains. Pacos love mountains.
Yeah, I definitely prefer the
Big
mountain.
rocks.
Definitely prefer the mountain to the beach, but I'm
Yeah.
over mountain.
I like beaches too. I just like nature. I don't know. I
I
love it all.
get bored at the beach after like a day.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you ain't going to be hanging out with me. Well, just for that day.
I want to go do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I'm on vacation, like I want to be just going all day. Like see and do as much as I possibly can.
I'm different. I like to not have any plan, and kind of so generally when we go out of town, there's not much for plan. We don't have a plan.
That's
We
how
show
I
up
do
there.
it too. But
And then we kind of just because I can't
I like
stand
to
having this
explore.
itinerary where you're rushed through everything. Because maybe I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I want to spend a bunch of time there. I generally, when we go places, I like to explore. I like to go in places in nature. But I also love the beach. I can spend a lot of time there meditating, connecting to the sun, the water, all those things. I used to not be able to sit still to do such things. So now I can find a lot of
yeah, it
happiness.
might be different now.
That is true. That is true. It's always evolving, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, but just when I'm in someplace new, I want to just
Yeah, I like to explore. That's what I like to
that's like when we went on our South America vacation, we had no plans at all.
Yeah.
I bought tickets to flying to Bogota and then to the Amazon and then to Medellin, and all I booked was places to stay, and we just kind of
Yeah.
went with it.
Uh-huh.
No plans at all.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That sounds like fun to me.
All we knew we were be here for 2 days, here for 6 days, and here for 6 days. And that was it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't do much vacationing.
No,
No.
I started to in more recent times.
Yeah, well, now the kids are getting older, it's a little more stuff to do.
Yeah.
When they're young, it just becomes a hassle because you got to get a
Yeah.
stroller. You know what I mean? It's just,
Totally.
just not, it's not conducive to fun vacationing with small children. And so now hopefully we can get back to doing some trips. But I always say I just like being home. I just like my life and living life.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I want to break from it?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I don't see it that way. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, I don't have a life I need a vacation from.
Right.
I just like to see everything. I like to see
like
the
to
beauty
travel.
of this world. Yeah.
Right. But that idea of just like going and just laying on the beach for a week, just, I don't know, it just seems not that.
Yeah, I don't
fun.
want to lay on for a week.
Right.
Like, so when we go, we like to go to like Siesta Key. Like, we like to go down there into Florida, Siesta Key area, and we'll just spend a couple hours at a time on the beach. Like,
Yeah.
we'll go onto the beach, we'll hang out, and then we go find things to do. We'll go to like a Mayaca State Park and connect with nature there. Mary's is fantastic, great leader. That's the best part. As we can get together and travel, she's like the greatest travel organizer I've ever
Oh, yeah,
met.
I bet.
You just don't worry about nothing.
Yeah.
Mary makes everything happen, and it just works out, and it's just right.
Yeah, but
and she loves it.
a couple
So-
years ago, we got to go to Panama City for a wedding, and that was great because I'd wake up 6 a.m., just go sit on the beach, look out over the Gulf, and just meditate for an hour or so, and that was my beach. You know what I mean? And the rest
Yeah.
of the day, I was driving around checking out different places in Panama City. I'd never been there before, and but yeah, just sitting on the beach in the early morning, nobody's there.
Yeah.
You know, and there's stingrays floating up, and you know, it's all sort of wildlife in the Gulf there. That was a beautiful place to just kind of meditate and stillness. But
Yeah.
yeah, but we weren't allowed to go in. There was like a swim advisory. So it was the whole time we were there.
Jellyfish.
Something like there's a lot of stingrays.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was like their mating season or what. I don't remember.
Right.
I don't remember exactly, but yeah, we weren't allowed to.
Oh, and then there's also red tide.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That could be it too. That's when the algae overgrowth happens.
But because I do love the water and I love the sound of the waves crashing, like when I'm meditating and stuff like that. But just to lay on the beach and like suntan, you know, I got too much motion in me to just sit still.
Yeah,
all day.
I can just sit still. I love the sun so much. I can feel it vibrating in through every square millimeter of my skin, and it's glorious. I love it. I never used to be able to handle such things. I never, in previous versions, just being outside in the hot was like, nah, that's not for me. Now it can't get hot enough.
But anyway,
Things
when I-
change.
Go to
when I-
Arizona for the summer.
when we get back
Yeah.
from vacation, we're going to float in a tank.
Good.
Yes.
That sounds like fun. 2 pastors and a Paco floating in a tank.
What could go wrong?
Or 2 Pacos and a pastor. It's the other way. Jim, you're a pastor, aren't
Yes, I am a pastor.
you? Yeah, talk about that a little bit. Tell us about how you got to be there and what that is for you.
Yeah. What that is? Well, how I got there. How did anybody get anywhere? For me, it felt like a divine calling. It always kind of been there. Going back to being a small child, 7, 8, 9 years old, we were pretty consistent in a Methodist church at that point in time. And I know in first grade, every first grader in this little Methodist church, they would get a Bible, as part of like their, it wasn't like a confirmation, but kind of like a confirmation type thing. And so I remember I would read it a lot in my room by myself, and I would read the red letters because I thought that's what mattered. And it's really all I could understand. The other, especially the Old Testament stuff, never made sense to me. But I could read the red letters of Jesus, and it made sense, as a small child. And I just remember thinking back then that one day I was going to grow up to be a pastor. And nobody I knew was really a pastor. Nobody in my family was a pastor, and so I don't really knew where it came from. But then I spent a lot of years, running away from that kind of stuff. My parents got divorced at 13, and I couldn't reconcile that with some God that was like a puppet master, at that time, that version of God that some people have. And so for me, it was just God can't be real. And so I ran away from that for a long time. And several years later, when I got with my wife, her dad was a pastor, or is a pastor, and so we would go to church from time to time. Well, she would go all the time. I would go if I didn't have a good enough excuse not to go. And so I started hearing stuff, and then I started having memories back of things that I used to think, and then all of a sudden, every night I was having these dreams, and so I was managing a restaurant at the time, and I'd have this dream where I'm in the kitchen of the restaurant, and I'm working. And then I would go out the door into the dining room of the restaurant, and it was a church. And everybody was staring at me, and I'm like, what are y'all staring at? And they're like, aren't you going to preach? I'm like, I guess, and then I would kind of wake up. And I was having that dream almost every day. And then it started infiltrating my thought during the day. Like, what is this? Why does I keep having this dream? And then I started remembering back to 7, 8, 9 years old, thinking that I was going to be a pastor one day. And so I called my father-in-law, and I said, hey, can we meet, And him and I didn't have much of a relationship at the time, and he was like, for what? I'm like, I just got to talk to you about something. He goes, what do you need to talk about?
How old were you at this time?
Probably 24, 25.
So you're a young guy.
Yeah. And we met for lunch and just kind of told him the whole story, told him what was going on, told him about when I was a young kid. Thought I was going to get some like sympathy, and he just started laughing, and I was like, what is so funny? And he goes, well, I hate to tell you this, but you're being called into ministry. And as soon as he said it, it just resonated. Like I felt that in my heart. Like
I can feel it in you when he said it.
I mean? My spirit just kind of like, that's truth. You know,
Yeah.
and there's something to that. And, at the time I loved my job. I loved working in restaurants. I loved what I did. But every day I just started loving it less and less and
Right.
less and less. And so my wife and I had to have a conversation about like, okay, like she was in grad school at the time, and I'm supporting her. I'm putting her through school, and got to the point where like, all right, well, when you finish grad school, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go back to school and, work on what I need to do to get my qualifications to become an ordained pastor. And so that was kind of the plan. And then her last year of grad school, it just got to a point where I just couldn't go to work anymore. It was so unbearable. People that I used to love there, I just couldn't stand being around. I couldn't stand the work anymore. And it just got to the point where it was January 1st, 2009. I gave my 2-week notice that I was leaving. It was December 27th, 2008, that I just had the worst day of work ever. I actually just left in the middle of my shift. My boss was there, and I said, well, you know what you know what you're doing. You know what you want to do. Obviously, I'm just messing everything up. I'm leaving. And so I went home, and it's like, man, what am I going to do? I started getting on like those job sites, that look for a job. I'm just trying to see who's hiring. And on the jobs, I don't know if it was Monster, I don't know which one it was, but I saw an ad for Lorraine County Community College. And I thought, and it's like enrolling now. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go back to school in a year anyway. Why am I going to go get another job now? Why don't I just go back to school now? And so I called the college, and they were enrolling, and I was still a student. I'd taken classes there a few years prior, and so I was still in the system. I didn't have to re-enroll and like get accepted or anything like that. I just had to sign up for classes. And so I just signed up for like a few classes and went into work on the 1st and said, the 14th is my last day. My classes start on the 19th, and my wife was like, well, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. She's like, how are we paying our bills? I'm like, I don't know. And so, just kind of that year, 2009, I didn't make any money. Things just started happening, and all of our bills got paid. And, I was in school, and then she graduated, and, things just kind of worked out. And then, so a few years later, I graduated college, became a pastor, and then completely lost my faith. So,
what's pastor college like? Tell us about that a little bit. I have two questions, kind of twofold. Can you give us like a definition? What is a pastor, and what is pastor training or pastor college like?
So, college it was just college. So I went to Baldwin Wallace, and I just got a degree in religion and psychology, and so that was just the regular, just reading, taking classes on Christian ethics and or the history of Christian spirituality, or I focused a lot of my other studies on Buddhism, Islam, some of the other more prominent world religions, because I wanted to have a better understanding of them.
Right.
I didn't want to just know one tradition. But so it was just regular college. It was just a degree. But most of that, my pastor training was working one-on-one with my father-in-law and a couple of mentors I had. And it was just basically just going through the Bible and different theology books and learning theology, specifically the theology of the tradition that I was a part of. And then just, like listening to my father-in-law talk to me about like, how do you how do you care for people? You know what I mean? And that was kind of always his strong suit, was just loving people. And so just watching him love on people, watching him love on the congregation, even though people, can be kind of nasty. And I know like this person here, like had hurt him in the past and said some nasty things to him and wrote him a nasty letter, and he's still there for them, loving on them, and just not holding that kind of stuff. And so that was kind of the lessons of just kind of observing him a lot, taught me a lot. And then when I graduated college, I went to seminary, which is like a grad school. It's like a master's of divinity. And that's more intensively just focused on like theology and like how to write a sermon. And but I didn't finish seminary. I dropped out after a little bit of time because it just wasn't really calling to me.
Seminary dropout.
Yeah.
So where do you go to seminary at?
I went to Ashland Seminary. So there's different colleges that have what they call ministry graduate programs, which is like a seminary. So the closest one to us that I knew of was Ashland Theological Seminary, and so that's where I went. But I was going very slow. I was only taking like a class or two at a time, because at that point in time I was working. We had a kid, and I didn't have the full time to devote to studies. And then eventually I was taking out loans to do it, and I'm like, I'm already a pastor, pastoring a church. Why am I taking out another $60,000 in loans to get a job that I already had? And so it didn't quite make sense.
Right.
And then also at that time in 2015, that's when I was kind of losing my faith as well, and had some run-ins with a few professors, I could say, and just said, okay, I don't think this is the place for me anymore. So I stopped taking classes there. But like I said, a lot of it is just on the job. It's just learning how to navigate relationships, how to navigate people who want help but don't know the help that they want and don't know how to ask for the help that they want, and also at the same time don't want to admit that they want help. So that's kind of what the training was like. And like I said, it was just a lot of it was just watching like my father-in-law, and then just kind of learning on the fly. And so that was that. So what was the other question?
Could you tell us kind of, for people that may not know, could you kind of define what is it to be a pastor?
Well,
I know it's a broad, big question,
and it is, and it's also going to be radically different for me.
I'm sure of
a
that.
Regular pastor,
Right? Just like when you ask a shaman, what does it mean to be a shaman?
Right.
Well, how about you tell us what it's like to be a regular pastor? Because you were a regular pastor at one point, and
a little bit.
How that's changed for you.
So I think a lot of it. I'm not trying to
I
downgrade
understand.
anybody, but like for me, it was a lot of trying to justify a paycheck. So it's being in the office all day, every day, just to justify that I went to work today. And then I'm in the office and I'm just like, well, what do I do? And I had like a list of stuff that I'm supposed to do every day. And I'm like, this is all just busy work. Well, and the funny thing is, one of it was I'm supposed to at least once a week or every other day, I'm supposed to walk through the building and flush all the toilets. I'm like, this is so stupid. Like, for what? Like, what? That literally
mold.
And well, no. And then one of the seals began to leak because the water just sat in it for a while. And they're like, yeah, you got to make sure the toilets are flushed. And I'm like, oh, I guess that wasn't just a busy task. I guess that was actually
maintenance.
There was a purpose to that. But yeah. So for me, it was just we're in the office. I'm supposed to be like studying and writing and calling on people. And it just felt like a lot of it was just kind of busy work because, like, what am I writing? I don't write. I'm not a writer. What am I studying? I'm just reading the Bible over and over and over again. And most of the people I'm supposed to be calling on are at work, So there's like a handful of people I'm just like calling over and over and over again because they're retired or, they're home or whatever. And so then I just started filling that time doing other stuff. Like I was volunteering for the Lorraine County Urban League. And so I would go there for like one day a week for 8 hours. And, that was like a work day. And then just volunteering on different, like a political campaign or volunteering for a city committee or something like that, just to fill time. And because I was just getting bored. And so then the pandemic hit, and I wasn't really going to the office much. And then it was getting to the point where, like, I need to get out of the house. So then I would just go to the office, and I would sit there and watch Netflix on my computer. You know what I mean? It's like, so then kind of when the pandemic kind of ended, we also noticed that we had saved a lot of money on our energy costs by having me not be there. And so I kind of stopped going to the office. And now I just kind of, wherever I feel kind of called to go on a certain day, whether it's going to the gym or coming here or going to visit somebody in a nursing home or spending time with my family, I have the freedom to kind of be whatever I want to be. Because one of the things that I've really pushed on my congregation that I have that show up and pay my salary, I say, you guys don't pay me to do a job. You pay me so I don't have to do a job. Mm-hmm. Because when, you know, your wife has a heart attack at 4:00 in the morning, you can call me and I can wake up and get to the hospital and spend the whole day at the hospital with you because I don't have to go sit in a cubicle. Right. You know what I mean?
You're available.
So you pay me to be available whenever it is you need me. And so if I'm not needed to be somewhere, I'm not going to be there. And so my office hours are by appointment only. If you want to meet in the office to talk about something, call, schedule an appointment, I'll be there. You know, if you having a surgery and you want me at the hospital with you, then that's where I'll be. And so that for me is kind of my day to day. But also for me, being a pastor, you know, that the word that always gets used is shepherd. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure I like the idea of being a shepherd.
Yeah.
But it's that idea of I'm here to help spiritually guide people.
Right. Guide.
People have a lot of questions. People have a lot of misunderstandings about what's going on in the world and what's around them. And they come to me, and my job is to try to help guide them through that. And traditionally, we do that through sermons. You know, I'm not a big fan of sermons. You know what I mean? I just never found lectures to be a conducive teaching mechanism. I think discussions are far more valuable. Of allowing people to ask questions, allowing people to engage and think about things as
instead of saying how it is and bye. Yeah.
But then there's also part of it is that we live in a time right now where somebody asked me recently one day, they said, what's it like being a pastor today? And I said, being a pastor today is a lot like being a VCR repairman in 1995. You know what I mean? The DVD's out. Most people are switching over to DVD players, and I make a living repairing VCRs. You know, I know my job is going away. I know it's coming to an end, as it currently is.
Yeah.
So either I become a DVD repairman, or I try to figure out what's going to be the next thing after the DVD. Because once again, if I'm a DVD repairman today, I'm out of luck because who has a DVD player anymore?
Yeah, now.
You know what I mean? Somebody gave
now
me
we
a
have
DVD
streaming
recently.
service.
Yeah, they gave me a DVD. I'm like, what do you want me to do with that? Somebody gave me a CD.
It's a coaster.
Yeah, they gave me a CD for like a music CD. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Frisbee.
Well, can't you listen to it in your car? I'm like, no, I have a new car. There's no CD player in it. Was it 1997?
It costs extra to get one now.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, you know what I mean? So right now it's just trying to figure out, for me, it's that idea of, in my language, God's not going to be without a witness, right? And so the church, in my opinion, for many reasons, and we can all agree, has done a poor job being a witness. But God has used it because it was his witness. And so there's going to be obviously a shift, and I think we all notice that there's a shift happening in people's consciousness and people's understanding. And so for me, I look at it as I have to allow the old paradigm to kind of die with dignity and at the same time giving birth to the new paradigm. I can't just go into a congregation and say, hey, we're not doing this anymore. We're doing it my way. We're doing it a new way, because that's not what they're wanting. You know what I mean? They want this.
And it'll create fear and resistance.
Right. And so we have to, while people are still wanting this current tradition, offer that, give them that space, but also at the same time transitioning into something new. And I've learned that the hard way, because I have just gone in and made wholesale changes radically. You know? And a guy said to me one time, he says, you can't turn a battleship on a dime. You got to do it slowly. I'm like, yeah, but you can't just lift the battleship up and turn it around and set it back down. And he goes, yeah, but then nobody realizes they've turned around. Nobody realizes that anything's different. You got to slowly, gradually turn the ship around. And so that's kind of what I'm doing now is just, for the last maybe 2 to 3 years, just slowly speaking consciousness into people, talking to them about God in a different way, using the stories of Jesus, which are our tradition, which I still find very valuable, but also using those stories to highlight certain things that people need to become aware of in our current reality. Because it might be a little bit different than what they're used to hearing. And so as I kind of slowly, and that was what's funny, how I ended up meeting you, is somebody met you and they said, well, man, it sounds like you're starting to say a lot of things he's saying. I was like, yeah, it's kind of been seeping in there because I'm slowly turning that ship. And then they're starting to pick up on, like, I think he's starting to speak a different language. Mm-hmm. And it is. It's a different language. So.
Yeah.
You, so when you were first starting out, you were very fundamental Christian pastor, like your father-in-law.
Yeah. I mean, anything stereotype.
At that time, was that like, did you still consider yourself an omnist?
What does that mean? What do you mean by
like, there's truth in all religion, but no religion is the truth?
No. I mean, I've always had what the Catholics would call a post-Vatican II view of religion, right? So in the Catholic tradition, Vatican II in 1962 opened up their ability to have dialogue with other religions, right? And so, and my understanding is their idea was that they're going to open up dialogue between other Christian religions. And then there's some people like Thomas Merton who was like, oh, he took that as like he started reaching out to Buddhists, and he started reaching out. And we're like, whoa, we meant just other Christians. And he's like, no, that's not what the papers say. But it was an openness to learning from and understanding other religions. And so I've always had that. But for me, it was, but Christianity is still the only true religion. There's truths found in Islam, there's truths found in Buddhism, but you still need to accept Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, or you're going to burn in hell for all of eternity. So there was still that kind of mindset. But yeah, I mean, anything you can think of as like a conservative, fundamental Christian, at that time, that was me. I mean, and I'm standing up to fight for the unborn. I'm standing up to fight against gay people getting married. I'm, voting red down the ticket, no matter what. And so, yeah, it was very in that stereotype of what most people think of.
How long was it before you realized that that's not who you are?
It wasn't long. Like I said, so 2009, I quit my job. Excuse me. I think 2013 is when I got ordained and started as like an assistant pastor there at the church. And then 2015 is when I took over. And I think it was July 1st, 2015 that I took over as a pastor and still very conservative, very fundamental. And it was literally not even 2 months. I mean, it was like August of 2015 where I was in the middle of a sermon and I said, I don't think any of this is true. I don't think anything I'm saying is right. None of this feels connected to anything here. Like it all, it was all up here. It was all just knowledge that I had learned and was regurgitating, but it never actually connected in my heart. And I always knew that. And so there's that story, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it was in the movie Rounders. If you ever watched the movie Rounders, when Matt Damon's character goes to talk to his professor, and his professor was talking about how he was supposed to be a rabbi. And he was in rabbinical school, and he didn't believe in God. And he said, well, just keep studying, keep studying. Eventually, God's going to show up. Just keep studying, And belief in God isn't important to being a rabbi, apparently. But it's that idea that as you go through the study, eventually. And so I was going through the study, and there's just certain things that, like, never made sense to me. Like the idea of hell just never made sense to me.
Same.
The idea of, like, a rapture, like, just never made sense to me. And there was just other like minor things too that most people probably won't even know are theological positions. But I just always kind of just felt like it wasn't real. But I just kept studying, waiting. Eventually it's all going to click. And eventually it's all going to become real for me. And it did.
Yeah, I was going to say it did.
It did. Just not. It just
not the way you expected.
Right. What became real was that it was all an illusion. And once I recognized this was all an illusion, the reality of, because for me, what really brought it to me was I'm preaching about this God that I've learned about, that looks radically different than the God that's ever showed up in my life. Because there's times when God showed up in my life, and it was never to hit me. It was never to punish me. It was never to He was never. It was always a hug. It was always a kiss. It was always an "I love you," no matter what I was doing. But that's not the God that I'm preaching about. So there's a disconnect between the God that I've experienced and the God that I've learned about. And so I actually just recently told this story. I was getting ready for my ordination exam in 2013, in that time where I was getting ready for it. And there was a group of pastors that we met with regularly, and one of them was my father-in-law's mentor. He passed away a couple of years ago at, I think, 94 years old. And so he was going to be one of the people who examined me for my ordination. And so we're at this pastor's luncheon, and he starts asking me questions, and it's all theology questions, and I'm just rattling it off because I know the theology inside and out. Like
I'm smart,
right? I can pass the test. I know the information. Yeah. And then he started asking me scripture questions, like where in scripture do you find it? Where in scripture? I don't know. I didn't study scripture. I just studied theology books. I don't know. You know what I mean? And he's like, how can you know theology if you didn't study scripture? Your theology should come from scripture. Like, you need to study the scriptures and then form your theology. And so he said, forget everything you've ever been taught. Go back and read scripture. And I did. And I was able to wipe that lens free. I was able to do it with that objectively. And the God that started showing up in those scriptures looked radically different than the God that I'd been taught about and the God that I was teaching about. And so that began the kind of the conflict that then in 2015 bubbled up and was like, none of this is real. And, so that just kind of started that process of trying to figure out who God really is and what God is. God even real?
It's you.
and so it just kind of led me on a journey of trying to figure out who I am and why I'm here. I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that makes total sense, especially about like scripture. Because when I read it now, it's in a totally different way. I assimilate it through my intuition, my feeling, and my heart, not the intelligence of my mind or literal. Because the translation, it's a translation. Mm-hmm. So things can be lost in the literal sense or changed or averted. What can't be is the underlying truth.
Right.
What God is the living energy of all things.
Right.
That comes through the scripture to me now when I read it. Now, I don't read lots of scripture, but I find myself more open. It like calls to me. Mm-hmm. Like something will call to me or something will pop up in my reality through someone else, and I'll be open to like research, go into it, because obviously it showed up for a reason.
Yeah, and I don't do Bible study, and I never really did the way most pastors would do it. But even now today, like for me, my spiritual connection comes through meditation.
Yeah.
And it comes through the recognition of that prayer isn't just muttering words over your food before you eat dinner. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Prayer is it's an act of connection. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked me recently, they said, well, whatever I said, and they said, well, then how does prayer work? And I said, well, if you believe that there's this deity that's sitting up on the throne and Anthony's getting ready to have surgery, and I pray to that deity, and the deity was going to have Anthony's outcome of his surgery be poor, but because I prayed, I changed the deity's mind, and now the outcome of the surgery is going to be good. Mm-hmm. I said, that's what you want to believe, and that's fine. I'm not going to tell you can't believe that. I said, but how it really works, because they've done studies, and I might just be quoting an episode of The West Wing, but I'm pretty sure this is real too. But there was a study where they took people who were getting ready to have heart surgery, and they had a certain number of them that were prayed for, and I forget the word for it, but they didn't know they were being prayed for, and they were being prayed for from like remote. So you're just at your house praying for this list of people who are having heart surgery, right? And then there's a number of people who weren't being prayed for. And the people who were being prayed for had better outcomes than the people who weren't. And so, I said, well, that's very easy to explain. I said, when we understand that we're all connected energetically, and if I'm connected to Anthony through my energy field, and I know that he's getting ready to have the surgery, I can send him positive energy through the energy field. That's going to help his outcome become better whether he knows I'm sending it to him or not, because it's all connected energetically. And so if I'm sending him my energy of my love and my love for him and my acceptance for him and my hope that he has a better outcome, he's going to have a better outcome.
Especially if he's open to receive it.
Right. And so that's, because I would, because that's something. I think pretty sure the people in the study didn't even know they were being prayed for. Because if I know I'm being prayed for, now I can change my own energy. You know what I mean? That kind of that placebo effect that, I'm going to have a better outcome because these people are praying for me. But they didn't know they were being prayed for and that they still had a better outcome.
Right.
Why? Because we're all connected energetically.
Vibration.
And so that, for me, removes the father sitting on the throne somewhere that receives it and then sends it back. You know what I mean? Because the movement of the love coming out of me, the movement of that energy is God.
Right. That's who the Father is.
Right. And so that's one of the things for the last probably about 3 years of just trying to really kind of ease that into people's understanding that God isn't a being, God is being. That God is movement. And it's the idea. And once again, all these beliefs are foundational Christian beliefs.
Right.
Like, I'm not making this stuff up. It was just lost when Rome kind of hijacked the church in the
many
4th century.
translations.
That's these literal translations.
Well, so most of it went away when Rome hijacked the church in the 4th century. So I think it was like 317, like the Edict of Milan, which made Christianity legal in the Roman Empire. And then around like 324 was when Constantine was supposed to. There's debates. Some say he was publicly baptized. Some say he was baptized on his deathbed. Some say his mom died and then he was baptized. There's different accounts. But around that time, Christianity became mandatory in Rome. And if you didn't believe specifically what was taught in the Roman school of Christianity, you were executed. And so there were people who ran out into the deserts and they protected the oracles of God, the oracles of Christianity. And when we've discovered these, what we now call monks and monasteries, cause it's funny because they were all considered Catholic now, because when the Crusades were going on, the Crusaders would come across these cloisters of these monks, and they would say, "Well, are you guys Catholic?" And they say, "Well, we don't know. What does that mean?" "Well, if you say you're Catholic, we'll let you live." "Okay, fine, we're Catholic." And then the Crusaders would go on, and they would go on practicing, But one of the stories from the Desert Fathers I love is an older monk and a younger monk are living together, and the younger monk comes to the older monk and says, "What's a quarrel?" And the guy says, "Well, a quarrel is if I say this brick is my brick and you say brick is your brick, then we quarrel." And the young man says, "Okay, well, I'd like to quarrel." And the old man says, "Okay, fine, here's a brick." And he goes, "Well, this is my brick." And the old man goes, "Okay." So just the idea of arguing, just the idea of possession to the early church is so foreign.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That the older monk wouldn't even argue, even when he knew it was just a game, And so, we think about, for me, what God is movement, and how can we understand that? Well, it's through the original teachings of Trinity. And we think, a lot of times we think of Trinity as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and it's pyramid, and it's hierarchical, and the Father's on the top, and the Son and the Holy Spirit are below it. But the original understanding, and the word for it was perichoresis. Peri meaning circle, and then choresis meaning dance. So they recognized that God was a dance. And there was these three elements that flowed in such perfect harmony that they created everything. Well, then, 1,000 years later, they discovered the atom, which is three elements that flow in perfect harmony, that they create everything. You know what I mean? So we recognize that table, God isn't the table. The table isn't God, but God is the table. Why? Because the movement of the table is what gives it substance. It's what gives it its stability. It's what gives it its structure. It's what makes it a table. It's the movement of the energy between those three elements. And so, it's said is nothing I teach isn't Christian, whatever that means. It's just a different version of it.
Well, it's all meant to evolve, and that's where it's kind of moving now. And like even our tradition, that's what I loved about it so much when it showed up in my reality and began to connect with, is that it's a living tradition and it's meant to evolve and change. And I feel that's the same thing even for religions. They're meant to, I think they've been stuck in the way that been used kind of as a tool of control. That's beginning to fade away, that's beginning to change, because evolution, the mind is evolving, and we're all part of the one mind, we're part of that one God mind. And I don't see any of these things as problems or they're bad or any of those things. I see everything as steps for us to get here. And that's the beauty of it all.
Yeah, and that's where I think if you go back, for me, probably, what year are we in? Go back to like 2016, 2017. Everything anybody taught that wasn't what I taught was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only one who's got it figured out.
Mm.
And everything I'd been taught before was wrong. And anybody who's still teaching that is wrong. And now I look back and I'm like, man, I had a beautiful foundation that was built for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the work that my father-in-law, the work that other men have put into my life to teach me that stuff that I needed to know at that time, was so wonderful. And it's still true.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I just don't need it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? For me, it's breast milk. It was this beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
I was an infant. I needed just breast milk. Just tell me hell, heaven, sin, bad, good. Just tell me that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause it's all just breast milk. It's what I needed. And so now I can look back and say, oh, I wasn't wrong.
Hmm.
It was just, that's what I needed then.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've added a little bit more flavor.
Right.
I'm eating some steak and I'm still not eating vegetables because they're disgusting.
Come on,
No, they're
man.
disgusting. Vegetables are terrible.
Roasted vegetables, yeah.
But yeah, so it's just kind of recognizing that we're supposed to evolve. That word that you move, we're supposed to be moving. And
Movement.
I was really-
like you said, God is movement.
Right.
There's
Well, it's
no
funny.
stopping it.
recently I went back and I rewatched a video of mine from 2017, and I was saying how pastors teach or treat their congregations like veal. We keep them tied to the ground, we keep them in the dark, and we barely feed them enough to keep them alive.
Mm-hmm.
And we never let them grow up because we're terrified that if they grow up, they're going to find out that they don't need us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, man, I can't believe I said that. First of all, I can't believe I said that as a pastor preaching a sermon to people who, at the time, I was saying were a bunch of veal.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? I didn't realize how insulting I was being, telling these people that for the last 40 years they've been veal and didn't know any better.
Yeah.
But there is some truth to that.
That's that battleship
Lot of-
turning on a dime.
right. but there is some truth to that across religious teaching. Is we keep people,
Right.
we give them just enough to let us control them.
Right.
And for me, it's not. I want to be free. I want to help people.
Yeah, my
be free.
spiritual immune system rejected that very early.
Yeah, yeah. So like I said, it is. But like I said, and there's some people who just never grow out of that. There's some people who they're just veal, and I got no issue with veal. I love veal.
Right.
Veal parmesan is like one of my favorite meals.
I agree with that. I'll have some veggies on the side, though.
Yeah, I mean, no veggies. Veggies are terrible. It'll never convince me of veggies. I mean,
Hey, never say never.
I'll eat a carrot.
You should learn by now that that's
I mean, I'll eat a carrot. I have a cucumber on a salad.
So you eat salad.
Yeah, but broccoli, cauliflower, that stuff straight from the.
Yeah, I don't really like cruciferous vegetables myself.
Well, like
Do
I told you, I
Oh,
have a cruciferous vegetable intolerance. So even God designed me to not be able to want to.
well, that's okay. That's good. What about like zucchini? That's one of my favorite go-to vegetables, which is really a fruit.
But to be fair,
yeah.
I'll tell you that zucchini is disgusting, and I hate zucchini.
Yeah.
I've never actually eaten zucchini.
Oh, so you don't know?
Delicious.
I don't know.
I think you would like
Well,
it, especially if you eat it with some
Olive
meat.
oil and a little seasoning and throw it on there and grill
But I've
it.
tried
Oh,
asparagus. Asparagus, I can't. I mean, it just tastes like mud and grass mixed together.
I don't really like it either.
But yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, I don't mind
There's
it.
not many vegetables I don't like.
Yeah, I'll eat any
I
of
don't
them
like.
pretty much.
There's not a whole lot of like squashes.
Oh, I love
Other than,
spaghetti
like,
squash and
summer
eggplant,
squash.
summer
I
squash.
don't
See,
like
I'll do
that
veal
either.
parmesan.
Eggplant's
I
so
love-
good.
I'll do a
love-
veal parmesan with a spaghetti squash, like the
Yeah, that's good.
spaghetti. That's good.
Do you ever have eggplant parmesan?
I've never eaten eggplant.
Oh my goodness! In that form, it's just sliced really thin, and then it's coated in breading and fried. I mean, everything's
yeah,
good
I
like
mean,
that.
Breaded and fried, everything
Yeah.
tastes delicious.
Zucchini lasagna.
Yeah,
I make those.
I've never had that.
I make that because we grow them in our garden.
Yeah,
It's been a beautiful harvest this year, by the way.
literally. I've had a beautiful harvest too, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even plant nothing.
Indeed. Agreed. I got lost.
Harvest-
Where were
harvested-
we talking
We've
about?
harvested some beautiful relationships this year. That's for
Yes, we have.
That's true.
for sure. Yeah, I don't remember where we were. I was ranting about something.
Veal.
Veal.
Yeah.
Yeah. But but to go back, so for me, like I look at where everybody's at right now. Like if I look at like what my father-in-law preaches, which it's very, and I know it's the funny thing is it's not very different than what I'm preaching now. What I look at it as his mentor laid foundations. And, when I would talk to his mentor would always get so frustrated that my father-in-law moved away from what he was taught. Right. But he still was very conservative, very in that bubble.
That's the veal thing.
Right. Because, his name is Roy. That was my father-in-law's mentor. He was just hellfire damnation, win them, wet them, work them. You know what I mean? Get them saved, get them into church, put them to work, And my father-in-law talked a lot more about the intimacy of God, the presence of God, the transformational prayer that we can heal from trauma, and really had a decent practice of helping people heal from trauma and move past some certain things. And so he just kind of put the walls up in the house. And then I've come along and put the roof on. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So for me, it's a gradual extension from what he taught to what I'm teaching.
Evolution.
So for me, what we call like dispensational theology, for me was just bones. But the presence of God, the intimacy with God, that was the meat. I kept all that for my father-in-law. But the dispensational theology, I just spit all that out. And I'm not saying that it's bad.
Yeah, it's just
I
not
just
you.
didn't need it. But there are people who do need it. Mm-hmm. They are in a place where they need that. And so we need people teaching that stuff.
Right.
But we also need the people who are teaching that stuff to release the people when they're ready to be released
not
to the
veal.
next phase. Not keep them trapped. Keep them
precise
as veal. And so for me, I had this beautiful vision of what the church can be, where we have, like, somebody will come to me and they're just wanting to get saved. Well, hey, you're not going to have any idea of what I'm talking about. Go check out First Baptist Church down the road. Mm-hmm. They're going to help you out.
Yeah.
And then they have somebody in their church that's like, goes to the pastor and says, hey, are we all connected energetically? Well, listen, you're kind of moved past what I can do for you. Go check out Grace Community Church down the road. Mm-hmm. Pastor, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And we can move people through the process. We can help people move through some sort of spiritual journey. Mm-hmm. And then when people come to me and are like, hey, we need something more. I'm like, well, you need to go talk to the guys at Moshi. You know what I mean? But like, we don't need to be so possessive of people. Right. And so, like I said, for me, it's not about that there's anything that anybody else is. Now, if you're teaching homophobia or you're teaching hate and that kind of stuff, right. Women, need to wear skirts and stay in the kitchen.
Right. Separation.
I will say that stuff is problematic.
Separation is of the fallen ego mind. So.
But as long as you're preaching inclusive, as long as you're preaching love, as long as you're preaching the message of Jesus, even in a very conservative form, I'm on board.
Yeah, I mean, same with recovery programs like AA and NAA, and I mean, they were designed to graduate from and move on, have that spiritual experience, and then go have your own experience.
Right. Yeah,
right. So because of the way the program works now, I don't do a whole lot with people in the program because for them, they know what life was like before Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to tell them something different. And for them to come where I'm trying to get them to go, they have to let go of Jesus, their understanding of it. Right? Or
misunderstand.
And it's too much of a risk for them to go back to...
Yeah, what if I'm wrong?
What if I let go? What if I come with you and you're wrong and I end up back there? So you don't need to. Just stay where you are. Because if I'm able to move you, I shouldn't be moving you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And this is one of the things Roy, the one that I told you about, he always told me, he goes, don't ever let a man change your theology. You know what I mean? If a man comes along and can change your theology isn't worth having.
Right, it wasn't solid anyways.
Right? Only person who should ever be able to change what you believe is God. And all my life, all the changes that I've gone through, it was always God who showed up and said, hey, you want more? Yeah. Okay, well, you got to let go of that, and then I'll give you more. And so there's this great quote by a guy named Richard Rohr. He says, the greatest obstacle... He goes, your last spiritual experience is oftentimes the greatest obstacle to your next one. Mm-hmm. Because at this one is when you think you got it all figured out. Mm-hmm. And to get to the next one, you have to admit that you were wrong.
Right.
I don't have it all figured out. And so for me, and I read that in like 2010, Richard Rohr's book, Everything Belongs. I read it in college. So that quote always stuck with me. And so when God would show up in my life and say, hey, you ready? I'm like, yep. let's move
Yeah.
because I know
Phases, seasons.
I know what that next step, and I know that next step is going to be better than the current step. But for somebody who's in addiction, I'm not going to push that step for them. Now, if they come to me, and I had a guy who was in treatment, and he came to me, and I moved him through a process, and it went really well, and then something happened, and he thought he could have a drink again, and he was wrong. And now I don't feel a whole lot of guilt about it. You know
shouldn't.
I mean? But
Everything happens the way it needs to.
you know,
And the thing is what I always tell people is sobriety is not the opposite of addiction. Because that's not what the intoxication isn't the addiction, it's the need to escape. So it's understanding what needs to be repaired within the mind that we don't, like we were just talking about. I don't want a life I need to take vacations from.
right.
I've created one I don't.
Right.
It's always a vacation.
Right.
It's beautiful all the time.
But it is nice going and seeing other places.
Well, yeah, because you're connecting energetically. I mean,
Right.
we want to see everything, but I don't have to.
Right.
It's not like if I don't do this, I'm not whole.
Right.
But it's just there and beautiful.
We can see it right here and experience it right here and here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to go anywhere.
Mm-mm.
Just breathe.
I'm everything, and so are you.
Yep.
How cool is that?
Pretty cool.
Real cool.
I think so.
Real cool.
But yeah, I don't consider myself an alcoholic anymore. I've healed that part of me that I was trying to escape.
Yeah,
and
so-
I don't either. That's why I tell people I used to be an alcoholic and a drug addict.
Yeah.
I'm not anymore.
Yeah, most people that come to me are in the stage of recovering. They've went through their 12 steps. They've been there probably for a long time usually. It's usually not people that are fresh out of 12 steps because there's still a lot of things that have to unfold and happen. But the people that usually come to us are people that have been through a 12-step program and some time has passed and they're starting to figure out the consciousness in them is starting to rise. And they're wondering, can I ever recover?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is yes.
And I think that's something. One of the things that we've talked about is I think a lot of, I mean, obviously a lot of addiction comes out of trauma, right?
Sure.
But there are also people who,
There's ancestral as well. We pass down.
but there's also some
sensitivities.
people that I'm noticing that struggling with alcoholism. Their alcoholism is causing trauma,
Right.
right?
Compounding.
But one of the things that I recognize is that their alcoholism is a way for them to cover up that vibration that they hear
Right.
that makes them uncomfortable because they don't know what it is.
That's why I was
what
doing
me.
it.
Yeah.
And so now it's like you can take somebody and they're 4 years sober and they're starting to recognize, like, man, that vibration I'm hearing that, the doctor said is tinnitus or whatever isn't going away. I think it's trying to communicate. I think it's something, you know what I mean? And but they're drawn into the drinking because they're just trying to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Instead of embracing
We try to escape.
it. And so I think that's one of the things is like
We don't know we can embrace it
Right.
until someone helps us understand that, or we have the epiphany, or God talks to us in a way where, like, that's what happened to me. I
Right.
didn't have anyone tell me.
you didn't have a teacher, you just knew one day.
God told me,
Right.
or my higher mind,
Right.
or the universe, however one wants to put it. I don't see the wrong words.
Right.
It was the feeling of the oneness came to me and said, hey, maybe you should take a break. That's how it started for me. And then I was like, all right. And I took a break. And then that made it really easy it knew how to talk to me. God talks to me very carefully because it knows how not to trigger my ego. Right. Like, just like when I was dying from lung disease and I had this angelic kind of being come to me and it said to me, perhaps you should think about things more positively, or can think about things more positively. It didn't say think about things more positively because I would have resisted. Perhaps, like perhaps you should take a break, not quit drinking because it's bad for you, and quit and this and that and all that stuff. I'm not good at quitting, so it's like I knew it couldn't tell me that. So it was
not a quitter.
it was. Let's take a break. And it knew that would work because the break, and then it knew I'd take a break for a little while, and then I would see how I feel, and then I would start to take it as a challenge. Oh, man, I've made it 3 weeks without drinking. How far can I go? I went 3.5 years. And after 3.5 years, that's when it said to me, try it, see how it feels to you. And I was scared. I was like, what if I revert back to how I was and all these things? And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. That's not who I am. And I went ahead and I had some drinks. I hung out with my uncle because that's the person I used to drink with all the time. And I had a fantastic time, and it was the first time in my life I didn't feel emotionally out of control.
Yeah. Well, and like so for me, it was very similar. Very similar. I had to give myself permission to drink in order to quit drinking. I couldn't say I can't drink anymore. And so, I had 3 years. I didn't have a drop. It was, I forget the exact date, but I remember the time. It was Ohio State played LSU for the national championship. And I had quit drinking. There was, right before the new year, Christmas sale was out. I think it was like 2007, maybe 2006, going into 2007. And I don't know if you guys remember back in the day, Great Lakes Christmas sale.
Yeah, it's still around.
Well, yeah, but it's different now. It's not.
I don't know. I don't drink it.
Yeah, it's not the same.
That
It hasn't been the same for a few years.
3 something dogs.
Yeah, that's the new that guy from Great Lakes. Went
Yeah.
there. Yeah. So the Great Lakes isn't the same
I see.
anymore. But like you go from, and we talk about like we go from completely sober to blackout drunk like nothing, like nothing. And so there was this night, and I had 22 ounce Christmas sales.
What?
At Quaker Steak and Lube. I was in the National Guard. We got off work at the National Guard, and me and my buddies from the Guard went to the Quaker Steak there, and I mean we had dinner and shots and Christmas ales.
And several gallons of Christmas ale make my liver quiver.
Well, it was probably like 9-10 o'clock, so we'd been there for like 4 or 5 hours. And I had cashed out. It was like $200. And I was getting ready to leave, and my one buddy from the restaurant called me, and he's like, "Hey, man, where you at?" I'm like, "At Quaker Steak," because I'm headed up there. I'm like, "Well, I'm getting ready to leave." He goes, "Well, hang out, wait for me." I'm like, "All right." So then he came back, and then I just started drinking again. I had another $200 tab until they eventually, I think they closed. And I don't have a whole lot of vague memories of that night, but I do remember driving home. I lived in Westlake, right by Crocker Park. And I was driving down 90, and I remember seeing a cop at the brake. I was a very good drunk driver. So good at drunk driving. It's like one of my best skills, especially humility. Humility is my other best skill. I'm really good at it. But I was driving, and I remember seeing that cop sitting there, and I remember thinking, he can't pull me over. I'm in a boat. Right? It's one of the vague memories I have. I do remember I got home, and I locked the chain over the door. My wife was still at work. And I opened all the cabinets, opened the freezer, opened the fridge. I remember doing that for some reason. I threw up all over the bathroom, and then I passed out in bed. And so I locked my wife out of the house. I wake up in the morning feeling terrible. I have like 70-some missed calls and like 70-some text messages from her telling me to let her in.
Trying to get in, yeah.
Yeah. So eventually, somehow she was able to get her hand in and unhook the chain and was able to get in. But she's sleeping on the couch, and I'm like, oh, man,
You're in trouble now.
I'm in trouble.
And then you probably had a pretty rough hangover, too, right?
Yeah, so I that day, I remember that. Well, that night, we talked, and there was no, it's okay, babe, I forgive you. It was, and I remember leaving that talk, I'm like, if I don't stop, she's going to leave me.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't the first incident, And so I said, okay, I'm done. I quit drinking. And she's like, okay, well, I don't believe you, but we'll see,
Mm-hmm.
And so then a buddy of mine was having a party for the Ohio State LSU national championship game. And that was in January, so it had been a few weeks. I had quit drinking, hadn't had a drink in a few weeks. And I said, well, I'm going to go to the party, but I'm not going to drink. She says, if you go to the party, you're going to drink. I'm like, no, I'm not going to drink. I'm going to go, but I'm not going to drink. She's like, well, if you drink, don't call me. I'm not coming to pick you up. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to drink. It'll be fine. Well, she was right. I was wrong. And I ended up calling her, and she ended up coming and picking me up. And I forget exactly what she said, but basically it was something to the fact that that's the last time I get to lie to her. And I was done. That was it. I'm done. I quit drinking. And I didn't have a drop for probably about 3 years. And then we were out one time, and I said, I think I can have a beer. And I had a beer. And it was fine. And, then there was a time we went to, there was something going on down, the International Festival downtown Lorraine. And we went to this Mexican restaurant after. And there was a group of us, and somebody ordered pitchers of margarita. And I said, well, I'm not going to pass up a margarita. Anybody knows me, I'm not passing up a margarita. Right? Not going to happen. So I had one, and then it was fine. And then, unbeknownst to me, somebody refilled my glass with the pitcher. Well, I can't be disrespectful, so I drank it. And then next thing I know, they filled up my glass again. Because after the second one, I'm like, okay, I'm good. After now the third one, I was like, man, I really want another one. I can't. And I told my wife was sitting there like, we have to leave right now. And she's like, why? I'm like, because I can't stop drinking.
I'm compromised.
I said, if we stay, I can't stop. I have to leave right now and go home. And she was just like, okay. And so now I knew, like, okay, I can have one and I can have two, but I can't have three. Because once I have that third, I can't. And then from then on, I didn't have anything to drink, because then it was also around that time I was starting to feel more that energetic sensitivity. I didn't really know what it was at the time. I was just kind of starting to explore it, just trying to start. And this is, coming into 15, 16, 17, and I could recognize, because now, like, Saturday night is my anniversary. My wife and I go out to dinner, and I'm going to have a beer with my dinner because I like it. But I'm going to have one. But I do notice it dulls that sensitivity. One day a year, my wife and I go to Put-in-Bay and we have drinks. We drink, that one day a year. And, for me, I always say it's like that pressure valve, and just one day a year I get to turn off my energy. I get to turn off everything and just
poison myself.
Yeah. But for me, it's been a good balance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's not something that, like, I don't have to worry about becoming an alcoholic again, because I'm not. You know what I mean? I know I can be again. I could be again. But I don't have an issue having a drink.
Yeah.
But like I said, once I do, I notice there's a difference in my vibration, for the rest of that day.
My last couple experiences with alcohol, I just not even one. Just doesn't feel good.
I haven't had it in about 10 years.
I'd rather just drop into my breath and get high on my own supply. That works the best for me.
We'll be doing
and then
that
that kind of gets rid of the want to even do it. Like, I just don't even want to. Mary and I, we were on vacation a couple years ago, and we were down in our place in Siesta Key, and Mary's like, "Hey, you want to get some margaritas?" Like you, I have a hard time saying no to margaritas. So I was like, sure. So, it was more cost effective to get a pitcher. And I proceeded to drink like 3 of them, 3 pretty hefty margaritas. And I was buzzing. I was pretty buzzing. And all I could remember was like, yep, I don't like this at all. This isn't how I like it anymore. I don't like to shut off. I love my energy field being open and being able to feel everything around me and connect with everything around me. As soon as it shuts off, it's just like, it brings back like these memories of all the time that I didn't really realize what I was doing. I thought I was having fun, but all I was doing was hiding from myself. Hiding from these.
So that one kind of like almost in a bad language, but kind of triggers that trauma of how you used to be.
In a way, I mean,
it's that bad language.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It definitely brings back a frequency, which brings back the memory. I've released all the trauma around it. Like, I don't feel like a heaviness around it. I just know, like, this isn't who I am anymore.
Yeah.
That's not for me. And then what it does is it actually brings clarity to me to why I choose not to drink. Why I don't really want to. I mean, I know I can, like, because I tested that in like 2019 or 2020 when I was testing it, and I started hanging around with my uncle more because I love him and I wanted to. That was the only way we could really talk or be together, because he's an alcoholic. So I would go and visit him at his bar and drink, but I'd try to keep it minimum. But I noticed that I was getting drunk, but I just wasn't having any reactions. Like, I used to like bring me into the trauma. And then I'd have emotional responses. Sometimes, not all the time, but now I just have no want. I can't think of anything in me that's like, I think I want to drink today.
Yeah. And like for me, you know how you guys like eating vegetables? That's how I feel about beer.
Yeah.
Like, it's not for me, and most of my time even drinking, it wasn't drinking to get drunk. I just enjoy the taste of a good quality beer.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
And so then that's why, like, for me, I know the result of what that can turn into, and that's why I don't have beer in my house. And like maybe 3-4 times a year at dinner, I'll order a beer, and then that one day a year at Put-in-Bay. But I just like the taste of it. You know what I mean? And when you're sitting there, like, so like, Saturday after anniversary, we go to the Angry Bowl in Huron every year for anniversary, and so I'm getting a really nice steak and baked potato and salad and a beer.
And ruin it with a beer.
Enhances it.
Yeah.
It enhances it. Is my former work in a restaurant.
I
know
used to
what beer to pair with what steak. You know, it's yeah.
Sounds like a scam. I think I used to like the taste of beer. I used to like to crack open a cold one after a hard day, kind of thing. But at this point, not at all. Just the flavor at all. It's like, what is this fermented garbage? I don't want this. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to have some kombucha. Do something that actually helps me instead of kill my brain. Yeah.
So anyway,
I'll have a non-alcoholic beer every once in a while, just because I do love the taste.
yeah.
There's a lot of good craft ones.
If I get any, I'll give them to you.
It's not often.
I've never had a craft non-alcoholic beer. I've
Yeah,
only
they make
had like
IPAs and-
I tried an O'Doul's before.
Yeah, that's just
Yes.
skunk.
And I was like,
Garbage.
this
Well, that's
isn't
like
good.
if I'm going to have a beer, like I'm not cracking open a Bud Light out of a can or a Miller Lite out of a can.
Well, then you're not a drunk.
Like like I said, I'm not. You know, I mean, it's going to be it's going to be a Great Lakes beer.
I was
It's
having
going to be
Keystone Light,
it's-
Bush, Natty Ice.
Yeah.
That's how I used to get it done because
Well,
I needed
yeah.
30 of them at a time.
Yeah,
man.
exactly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember in the Army, we each beer bong a 24 pack of Natty
Love
Light
beer bong.
before going to the
Yeah.
like everybody gets a we go get like a hotel, get a case of Natty Light, funnel them all through the beer bong, and then we go out to the club.
Dude, I used to love the beer bong. The best was on a Halloween. I went over a friend of mine's house and I bonged 2 beers. And then he's like, hey, what happened? I wanted to bong one with you. I was like, dude, I just did 2. I feel full. He's like, oh, you can do it. So I bonged a 3rd one. It went down, came right back up, and all the beer was still cold. You could see it. It was creating, it was warm outside, and that cold beer came up, and there was like a fog coming off of it.
So I used to go to, when I was a teenager, we used to go to the NASCAR race up in Michigan, Father's Day weekend. And so we had 2 campsites. My uncle would have a campsite, my dad, we had a campsite. And my dad was always in the beer bong. He taught me how to beer bong at a young age, right? And nobody has ever beat me. Nobody, except for my dad. And even at the end, before I could drink, he couldn't beat me. Like literally less than a second, gone.
Bunch of inappropriate jokes have arisen. I'm
Right.
gonna leave those alone.
But so we went to the race and we had this thing and we made the beer bong zone. So anybody who walked past our campsite, in order to get past our campsite, you had to do a beer bong. One person in your group had to do a beer bong. We supplied the beer, but one person had to do it. Well, this one guy was like, Psh, I ain't doing a beer bong. And he grabbed the funnel and he filled the funnel with Jägermeister. Beer
Oh,
bonged Jaeger.
whoa.
And another guy was like, Psh, I ain't beer bonging 1. I'll beer bong 2 standing on my head. Just did a handstand, bonged 2 beers standing on his head, got up, took 2 steps, and face planted. Funniest thing I ever saw. And, so yeah, those were always.
We had a 3-story beer bong in college.
Yeah.
One of our friends had an apartment on the 3rd floor with a little balcony. So, I mean, this thing fit 8-10 beers. There's only a couple people who could ever do it. I was not one of them.
Yeah.
But
Usually the fluid after about 3 is enough to overflow. And
yeah.
Well, they had the lube tubes at Quaker Steak and Lube. On
Yeah,
the
yeah.
top,
Oh, yeah,
lube
yeah.
Tubes. Yeah, I took one to the head once. Full. Yeah. But one of my best beer bonging stories was one of the members of our church. Their kid graduated high school, and they were having a graduation party. And so they had beer there, and people were drinking beer. And people we know were there and had a few drinks, and somehow we got on the topic of beer bongs, and somebody said something about shotgunning beers and doing beer bongs, and they said, well, we don't have one. Everything's in bottles. I'm like, well, you can shotgun a bottle, right? You can't shotgun a bottle. I'm like, you can shotgun a bottle. I'm like, I can show you how to shotgun a bottle. Like, give me 2 straws. So you take 2 straws, you put 2 straws together.
air in, air out.
And you put it up, and the air goes into the straw and pushes, shotgun a bottle. And so there I was, the pastor of the church at this graduation party, teaching people how to shotgun bottled beer. And I had to do like 4 or 5 of them because everybody kept asking me. And now the one guy's like, hey, come here. My pastor, you got to see what my pastor can do. He's calling over his buddies, that don't go to the church. And, I got to do another one, and, but yeah, so that was a really funny time. I got in a car. My wife was like, should you really have been doing that? I'm like, I don't know. I did.
It's too late.
Too late now. But anyway, I'm sure we can find more productive things to talk about than other than drinking.
Bonging beer.
We were just talking about our alcohol abuse.
Yeah,
So that way, this actually shows that we're human.
Yeah.
That we have experience with these things. So.
Yeah. We're not just talking about it. We lived it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the important part.
I can recall all of those feelings of despair and just lack of joy in anything. Like, I never want to feel that again.
They're beautiful teachers. That's how
Yes.
I see them all. I see all of those things, all the things I used to
Most
be afraid of.
uncomfortable I've ever been.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt. That'll do it. It's like having a joint bent the wrong way a little bit. It'll force you to change. That's what it'll do.
Well, that's why, for me, like, so when I started thinking about hell differently, like a long time ago, and there's this guy, Thomas Merton. He was a monk in Kentucky in the 1950s and 60s. He died in 1968. But he has this book, and he's talking about hell, and he's talking about hell as hatred, and he's talking about how, like, hell's a place where you hate everybody, and everybody hates you because you hate you. And all you're doing is just trying to get people to stop hating you so you'll stop hating you. And I remember the first time I read that, I'm like, dude, that's high school. That's not hell. You know what I mean? That's high school. And so it just got me questioning. And then I got to meet one of the monks that was a student of his. And, so I asked him about it. And he said, well, I believe that if you're going to hell, you're probably already there.
Yep.
And then I started thinking back to, like, when I got out of the Army. So before I went in the Army, I had no identity. I had no purpose. I had no, mission in my life, And I got in the Army, and I belonged to this unit. First time I ever belonged to anything. I was a soldier. First time I ever had an identity, and we had a mission. There was a purpose, like every day we had something we had to do. It was train because we were going to go to this or whatever, And when I got out of the Army, I lost my belonging, I lost my purpose, and I lost my identity, and I was lost. And, my normal, just regular Tuesday night was, 3 or 4 Xanax, 3 or 4 Percocets, and a 12-pack of beer, just because I didn't want my mind or my body to feel anything. You know what I mean? And that's hell. Like, how could anything get any worse than that? I'm thinking I'm just partying every night. No, like, I'm just trying to medicate the hell out of my system. Literally medicating the hell out of my system. And, I can't think of, and then, I said this one time, I said, I can't think of God ever doing anything worse to me than that. And you're going to tell me that if I would have died then, he was then going to torture me even more than that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think living in that place that I was in then, that's the worst torture you could go through.
I agree.
You know what I mean? And I know I've heard you guys' stories too, and it's very similar
Yeah,
place.
just
You know
doing
what I
the
mean?
bare minimum to just
Right.
exist.
And then you're going to tell me there's something worse after that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
I wouldn't trade it for nothing.
Yeah, no.
Being in hell has taught me how to really appreciate heaven.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's
Open my heart to
Right.
heaven. Yeah.
And that's one of the things where, like, if we go back to, like, our conversation, one of the things you guys have met Rob Guy, one of the things he said really early when I met him, he says, you can't appreciate grace until you've been under the law. And for me, that's religion. Like, you can't appreciate the grace until you've been under the law. Like, and that's one reason why I'll say, like, that kind of conservative, kind of fundamental kind of teachings, whether it's Christian or whatever tradition, they're important to teach people the law, so that way when they move away from it, they can really appreciate the grace now. And you gotta go through hell to get to heaven.
Right.
And I appreciate my time in hell because now I get to experience heaven. I appreciate being under the law because now I get to experience grace. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah, totally beautiful. I mean, it works a lot of different ways because I work with a lot of people who in this spiritual community, and a lot of them have a big disdain, a big resistance to anything religion. And some of them get really confused and weirded out when they find out that I have a close connection with Jesus. They're like, what does that mean? They're like, well, this isn't from the standpoint of religion. I don't identify myself as a Christian, but I do understand, and I have a close connection with what, for me, is a living spirit of Jesus. And what I always try to challenge people to do, especially if you have a lot of, like, religious conditioning that makes you really mad at religion. Lots of people are pissed at religion, is what it is. They don't want to hear anything about it. As soon as you say the word Jesus, they shut right off and they don't want to hear anything else. And what I try to do is ask people to do your best to try to learn about the teachings of Jesus away from religion. And because it's pointing out that, Jesus wasn't a Christian. That's not who he was. He was a teacher of living energy. He brought that here, the awareness here to us to show us who we can be. what we're capable of doing and what's really available to us. But one can only kind of see that. For me, that worked really well because I was very much an atheist, and I looked at religion, especially the Christian religion, as control, because it is to a certain degree. But there's also the underlying truth. The underlying truth cannot be covered by anything man puts on top of it. That vibration is alive and well and comes through deeply and strongly through the teachings of Yeshua, through Jesus. And that's how my explanation is. People will say, like Christian people will call it Jesus Christ, as if it's this, that's this thing, and they're seeing it as this man. Right. And what I really tried to explain is like Jesus was a spirit. He had a man's body, and what he embodied was the frequency of consciousness that we can call Christ. Right.
Well, that's for I talk about the guy, his name's Richard Rohr. I mentioned him earlier.
I'm aware of him.
He said to me, well, not to me, but in a book, he said, Christ isn't Jesus' last name.
Right.
And that's what we messed up. And that's, so for me, there's that distinction between Jesus and Christ. Jesus showed us what it's like to live a life incarnated by Christ. But the same Christ that incarnated him incarnated me. So I'm Jimmy Christ just as he was Jesus Christ.
Hi, Jimmy Christ.
What I mean? Am I aware of Christ in me? Jesus was aware of Christ in him.
Yes.
But once again, Jesus wasn't the only teacher in the world to have ever recognized that.
Correct.
Right. And so one of the things that we do, like we talk about, you say like, well, what you do outside of religion, but it's not. But what I mean is because it's not Christian, we say it's not religion. Because the only religion we know in our context is Christian. You know what I mean? Like you go Great Northern Mall and you pull people and say, well, are you a Christian? They're like, well, yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe in God. So everybody who believes in God's a Christian?
Right.
Because Muslims believe in God and they're not Christian. Hindus believe in God. But in our context where we live, in our culture, just believing in God means you're a Christian.
Could be.
Right.
I believe in God, but I'm not a Christian.
But what I'm saying is, for that understanding of when we talk about I'm not religious, what we're really saying is I'm not Christian.
Sometimes.
You know
I'm saying I'm not religious.
I'm not talking about you. You know what I mean? But I'm talking about when people say, well, we hate religion, I don't want anything to do with religion, they're actually saying I don't want anything to do with Christianity. Because the Christianity they've been shown.
There's other religions too that I've seen people do this. They don't want anything to do with the religion that's been presented to them.
Right. And for us, in our culture, 9 times out of 10, that's
Christian. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they're not rejecting religion. They're just rejecting Christianity because they don't really understand what religion is.
They're rejecting the lie that's been grafted upon them.
We're rejecting what we've done with religion because I will fight for religion. I will fight. Religion is good. Religion is necessary. Religion, when we think about it as a construct, what is it? It's a set of principles that guide us. It's a set of practices that keep us grounded. It's elements that we recognize as sacred that help us keep us grounded. And in that definition, all of us are religious.
I agree to that definition, but that's not the common understanding.
Because it's been bastardized and distorted.
Because we can use a different word. There's a different word that doesn't have all those vibrations connected to it. Because I'm an energy master, so I feel the energy. And I agree completely with what you're saying. Because I can see that energy. I can feel that energy, that truth. But I'm pretty sure from my understanding of what I feel, that's not the general consensus. Like a lot of people see religion as something else, like I did, as control, especially if they're atheists. People that become atheists, because that's the part that they've rejected, the part that man has created in the name of control.
Right.
But I can agree with that if you go deeper into what it really is. Not what we've been conditioned to believe it is. Yes, I agree fully with that.
Because that's why if you look at every religion I've studied, even recently just coming in contact with the Paco Kuno, what I would call a religion, they're all, at the core essence of what they are, they're all the same. It's about love.
Practice.
It's about embrace. It's about.
That's why we call it a practice to get away from religion. The word.
But they're all. But what
I agree.
What we've done with them, we've bastardized them and we've distorted them in the name of profit and or capitalism, and it's ruined it. And it's ruined. That's why you said you can't reclaim that word right now because it's just so damaged.
Right. Maybe later.
Right. Hopefully one day
we'll use new language for now.
Right. And so that's why it's we talk about our tradition, which you can't really bag on that, and that's why I like the fact that you guys say the Pakakuna tradition instead of religion. Because if you say, "Well, this is our religion," people are like, "Oh, we're done," or "This is our tradition." And even I follow the Christian tradition, not the Christian religion.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I make that distinction is for that very purpose.
It's living medicine.
You know what I mean?
You took it and made it your own.
Right.
Right.
So
as it's meant to be.
Right. And so if we use that new language, but for me and the concept of what religion is supposed to be, I'll fight for it.
I agree with that.
I'll fight for it.
I won't fight anyone, but I'll agree to it. Yeah.
I'll fight you. I'll fight
Whatever you resist persists.
Pretty sure I can take you and a black bear.
At the same time.
I don't think so, man.
Not at the same time.
Hey,
Not
Dave.
at the same time.
Dave, I think you should move the furniture. Me and Jim are about to have some fun here.
Changing the podcast format.
I'm going to teach Jim about jujitsu.
We talk. We talk, and then we wrestle. But no.
We're getting closer in weight class, so
we are.
which probably isn't an advantage to you. So
yeah, but I'm getting stronger.
yeah,
which
that's
is an
good.
advantage
Yeah,
to
that's
you.
good. That's good.
Yeah, so-
That's really good. And you've been doing well, by the way, with that.
Yes,
So
yes.
I'd like to congratulate you on your
feeling
continued
very well. Feeling good.
growth.
Feeling a lot better than I was 6 months ago. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Jiu-jitsu's next.
yeah. Well, it's always been something I wanted to do.
Wrestling. We'll do so. We'll just start off with some grappling.
Yeah.
Me and Dave were talking about it before. We should find a place to start grappling, and we have a
There's
few
business
friends and
card.
stuff.
I was gonna say there's a business card up there that drew my attention.
Oh, UFC gym?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that drew my attention.
We have a friend. Her name's Brisket. Jen.
Brisket, Jen Krause. She's amazing.
Yeah, she's a badass.
I think she's blue belt
Yeah,
So,
she's practices jujitsu.
and a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
I'd like
She's
to.
just jacked.
She is. She's like. She's like. Reminds me also like of a kangaroo. You know, like kangaroos are really jacked. Yeah, but she's beautifully awesome.
Yeah, she is.
I love her. She's great.
Got such a bright light.
Yeah.
I love everybody.
Yeah, me too. Long as they're not going against your ideas of religion, because then you'll fight.
No. I'll love them, but they're wrong.
Yeah. Are they?
I'll love them in their wrongness. 'Cause I'm right. I mean,
Yeah.
why would I be wrong? I'm not the wrong one here. If you
Yeah,
disagree with me, it's obviously
so when
you.
you use this sort of wording down there in Peru, they do see the Pakokuna tradition as a religion, but in the way you're describing, or the way that we understand in the depth of it. Up here, we don't use those words because it becomes confusing. Because up here, where we're at, generally religion is a dead tradition. It's here's what it is, here's the rules, don't go outside of there, don't ask too many questions, this is how it is, period. That's generally how it's taught and shown up here. Whereas the traditional idea of how it's supposed to be through the tradition is for, here's the information, let it grow within you. Let God come to you. Let God grow in you and be you. And that's really, and then all of us have kind of a different understanding. That's really how it's meant to be. With these, when we congregate, it's not to congregate so we all agree.
Right.
It's that we're all loving and accepting.
Right.
And I accept your viewpoint and however it is, even if it doesn't match mine. And that's something that's taught down there too. Like if they talk to someone and someone says something, even if it's in the same language, they don't disagree with them. They just say, "Oh, I understand that's how it is for you."
Right.
And since I love you, I won't try to steer you in another way.
Well, one of the reasons why this really came into my consciousness was my time at Baldwin Wallace. Like, I remember when I went there, I knew I was going to be the smartest person there, because I'm always the smartest person everywhere I go. Right.
There's that humility again.
Right. I'm so good at it. But I also knew that I was going into very hostile territory. Right. I'm a right wing literally dues paying member of the GOP. I'm a devout Christian, and I'm going to this very liberal college. You know what I mean? Their theology department, their religion department is very liberal. Every viewpoint is accepted. Everybody is welcome here, except fundamental Christians. Right? You can believe whatever you want to believe, but you can't believe that. And I was that. So I knew it was going to be very hostile. And I met this group of students, and there's probably maybe like 12 to 15 of us. And it was always them versus me. And I was always able to kind of hold my own to a point, because they were also all very academic people. You know, they were very intelligent, and I wasn't. You know, they're smart, they're book smart, and I'm intelligent. but like I didn't know, like I haven't read a lot of books. I don't know a lot of academic stuff. I barely graduated high school. You know what I mean? So they would be able to hit me with their knowledge, and I wouldn't mind. Well, this person said this, but I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. But what it did was having those debates every single day began to help me learn. And I started being able, because I would say things like, I don't believe in speaking in tongues. And they were like, well, what do you mean? You don't believe people speak in tongues? Like, I can show you videos of people speaking in tongues. Like, how can you say you don't believe people speak in tongues? Like, people do. I'm like, well, so then I had to figure out, I don't believe that speaking in tongues is necessary. You know what I mean? I had to learn how to say things in a better way. And recognizing that type of debate, that type of discussion was how I was able to grow. And then I would go to class and I would hear a lecture and I wouldn't learn anything. Or I would go to church and I would hear a sermon and I wouldn't learn anything. But then I would have a conversation like with you guys and I learned so much. I learned from you. I learned your perspective. I learned how you see things, but I also learned how to better use my language. Because I'll say something and you'll be like, bro, and you hit me with it. I'm like, I got to word that better. You know what I mean? And so that idea, that conversation, that dialogue is where we grow at. And surrounding yourself with people who agree with everything you say and just wanting to hear you regurgitate what you've been taught, it isn't helpful.
Not at all.
But creating an atmosphere where we are all different, where we creating a church, for lack of a better term, where everybody is different and every opinion is valid, and we can come together with some guidelines, obviously, and have some conversation that are going to help each other better learn how to explain what it is you believe. Because if I go to somebody, just a regular Sunday churchgoer, and they say, "What do you believe about God?" Are they going to be able to answer that question? You know what I mean? And
I think it's also important to be with people that have that intention. So when you sit down to talk with people and your intention is for discovery and for learning and not for defense, that's really when the conversation can open in a big way.
But see, that's hard to do because I know, and I've seen you do it to me and me do it to you, where I'll challenge you. Your initial response is defensive. And then you'll call me like an hour later, text me an hour later, hey man, thanks a lot. I really was able to receive that after I thought about it.
Well, I could see it right away. It just takes time for me to understand.
Because our ego gets in, because you'll say something corrects me and I get really defensive. You know what I mean? Because that you attach my ego, just like I did to you. And then later on I'll think, I'm like, oh man, damn it, he was right. You know what I mean?
He never calls me and tells me though.
I have to.
That's me. That's me. I'm the one that always shows up like,
that's nonsense. That's not true.
There's that humility again.
That's not true. I've texted you before.
Maybe.
Our last Moshi meeting, we had, there was a Lutheran minister, a former Methodist minister, a Jewish lady, a former Mennonite.
Mennonite, yeah. That's right. Such
Catholics,
diversity.
Christians, there's a Satanist in our group. And it was, everybody is having the same conversation.
Yeah, I'm waiting to have that Sunday afternoon that I'm able to get here in time. It's on the agenda.
You can do it.
It's there.
Yeah, no, I find some of the greatest things in being triggered. Yeah. Like if I don't mind it at all. Like, so if someone says something to me and I notice it triggers me, I love it. I'm like, good, I'm going to learn something here.
It took me a while to figure out what that trigger was. And that trigger is just the realization, that's something that I need to heal and learn from.
Right.
I don't need to defend, because that's the thing is I get triggered or we get triggered. Yeah. Our first instinct is I got to defend that trigger.
Right.
Instead of, why is that there?
Well, it's just because we don't feel safe. We've trained ourselves to be in a defense fear.
So now it's like, okay, well, why is that trigger there? Where does it come from? And how do I heal it? So I don't have that, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I don't know if we ever get fully there. I think we're always going to have that ego kind of creeps back in. It's one of my favorite.
Well, as long as we're vibrating in the third level of consciousness, yes.
But I love that there's a Buddhist expression, and it's not, I forget what sect of Buddhism it is, because they're, anybody who says Buddhists believe, it's like saying, Christians believe. We all believe something different. But their idea of Buddha isn't a person. Buddha is a way of being in the world, and it's a way of being. It's a
frequency of consciousness.
But it's completely stripped of ego.
Like Christ.
Right. But it's completely stripped of ego. It's completely stripped of self, of desire.
Pure love.
And so the idea is that if you see Buddha, you kill Buddha. Because if you think you've become Buddha, you still have too much ego and self to actually have been Buddha. So you need to kill. You know what I
Because
mean?
Buddha wouldn't recognize that.
Right. Because no matter what, we're always going to have a little bit of element. You know, and so the process, the journey we're on is just, you know, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. So if somebody asks me, they say, well, what religion are you? What tradition for me? I always say, for me, the words I use, I follow the contemplative Christian tradition, right? And so it's very much in line with what we talk, how we talk. It's about awareness. It's about being present in the moment. You know what I mean? It's not worrying about what I got to do next. It's just right now I'm here with you guys. There's nothing else going on except for this conversation. And so it's just a way of being in the world. And that's kind of like the tradition that I follow. And so somebody asked me the one day, and they said, well, what's the difference between like somebody who's in the flow and somebody who's out of the flow? How do you know when you're in the flow, and how do you know when you're out? And so we don't really know when you're in the flow, but you know when you're out of the flow. And then I said, and the biggest difference between somebody who is kind of living in this tradition, it's not that you have removed your ego. It's not that you removed your judgment. When you see somebody and you have like that judgment of them, it's you become aware of your ego. You become aware of the behavior.
You become the observer.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's the exact word, is you're able to now observe where that thought is coming from. You still get the thought because you can't control it, but now you recognize, oh, that's coming from a pain that still needs that blockage, you know. And that's what so when I talk in Christian language, that blockage, I'll call that sin.
Right.
So sin isn't my behavior. Sin is the thing in me. It's the wound. It's the thing that's,
we call it hucha.
It's disrupting the
Heavy energy.
Right. And it disrupts the flow.
Correct.
Right? And so all that judgment does is I observe it, and now I'm able to recognize where it's coming from. And that's a place that now, okay, that needs some work now. I get triggered, you know, you threaten me or whatever with my thought. Okay, well, why do I think I need to be right still? Oh, I guess I'm still not quite there yet.
So I guess this question came up to me. So after you identify, because, you know, it's heavy energy, it's what that blockage is. What does one do? Like, we know what we do. What do you do with your heavy energy? How do you transmute that? Because you can't kill it. Right. You can't do any, and if you try to rip it away from you, it'll recirculate and come back. So how do you ground that, or what's your practice to ground your heaviness?
It's really hard to put that into words. But I mean, you're right. In the great words of the great American poet Bret Michaels, the scar heals, but the wound remains. And so what that does is it recognizes there's still a scar that's open. And so for me, it's putting that energy into that. Okay, what is that? Why do I still feel inadequate? Why do I still feel like I have to prove I'm right? Okay, so that comes from that time that I was told I wasn't good enough. Okay, now I got to go back to that memory. And I got to move myself into that memory and recognize that it's not true.
Yeah, we call that imprint.
Right.
So you're becoming aware of an imprint, and you're beginning to resolve it. The only thing that remains, though, is the heavy energy, and that heavy energy needs to be transmuted.
So once again, it's that process. So, you know, if it's a traumatic experience, what I call a big G traumatic experience, right? And I haven't had many of those in my life. Mine have all been paper cuts, you know, just a shit ton of paper cuts in my life. And but you go back into that moment and you look for what we would say Jesus, you know, and recognizing that I wasn't alone there. That I got through. Jesus was in it with me. He was he was feeling the pain that I was feeling. He was taking it upon himself, and I don't need to live in that pain anymore because he removed it. And so for me, when I talk about even in the Christian tradition, Jesus didn't die to forgive me of my sins. Jesus died to heal me of my wound. Right? And so I don't need to be forgiven, because forgiven means that before it occurred, I was already given.
Yeah, because you're already forgiven.
I didn't hold, now, because like Dave, if you hurt me today, I don't need to forgive, because I'm not going to hold it against you to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the big misconception.
That's what forgiveness.
Forgiveness is also, it's not something you do or give. Right. It's a frequency of consciousness that comes through our Christ life.
You're not going to hold account. So now I got to go in and recognize, like, oh, I don't need to hold that lie against me, because nobody else is either. And now I can let it go. And it's through meditation, it's through my breath, that I can what will happen is I'll go into my meditation, and when I kind of get into that theta brainwave, I'm able to, those things will come up that I've been processing, that I've been dealing with, you know what I mean? And they manifest, and I feel them come up, and in my imagination I have a car drive in front of me, and I take that emotion, and I put it in the car, and I shut the door, and I watch it drive away, and it's gone.
Where's it go?
It's just gone. It leaves. You know what I mean? It just moves out of my consciousness. And so once I watched it leave, because once again, it wasn't real to begin with, it was just an illusion. And so now it's gone. The illusion's removed, and there's still a wound, but the scar healed. I still have the memory of it. I still know that situation was traumatic. I still know that comment that my mom made at the time that I didn't think anything of was actually a pretty deep paper cut. You know what I mean? That manifested years later.
That's cool. So we work in the space of transmutation of that. Like I've taken all of what you're saying, the wounds and scars, they're gifts to me. I can tell you with the fullness of my heart that I can tell you today that I've never struggled a day in my life. That's not how it used to be. And I can also tell you I never will, because of the way that it works for me now. So grounding our energy is how we work through these things, is allowing ourselves to not only just let it go, but we're actually doing a service and feed it to the earth. We feed it to Pachamama, because to her, because it's all condensed light. Everything's light, even the things we call evil or bad. And we can give this heaviness and give it to the earth. And by giving it to the earth, we're doing a great service, because for her, it's like fertilizer. It's like sweet chocolate. She takes it within her and composts it and mulches it and brings it back to the light of the surface, thus completing a cycle. And then it's through that cycle completion that one really starts to go beyond the limitations of the damages or the perceived damage. Because the thing is that thing that we call trauma is just data. I always remove the word trauma now. I don't use it anymore. Data. This is unresolved data. And if we resolve the data, it can be used properly and actually bring light into us, bring fresh light in.
I mean, that's what I was thinking about. Like, I was thinking about if you take a person and you have this person live and they never get any trauma, they never get any of that data, they never get a wound, they never get anything, they just live this perfect life. What do they have to learn from?
Nothing.
Well, yeah, well, that's not why we're here,
right? And that for me, like, that's one, like, I look and I've had a very fortunate life, like, I've never been
perfectly
rich.
Challenging for you,
right? You know what I mean? But like, I mean, I hear some of the stories of people that I meet that have been in prison or whatever.
Yeah, that's not, and the thing is, that's not better or worse.
Right.
That's just what their story required for their soul to grow.
And so, but like I said, like, I can look back at mine and I'm like, man, there's not one itty bitty thing that I would have undone or did. And
anyway.
And I'm so grateful for all those times I was told I wasn't good enough, or all those times I was told I don't belong, or all those times I was, you know what I mean? I'm so grateful, because each one of those things now becomes a lesson. And I might not have understood at the time, but now that I'm able, now we're doing this work, right? And we're more sensitive to those things. Now I can, like, I never realized when Cammie rejected me in the 5th grade that it had such an impact on my life, that for the rest of my life I was going to be terrified of rejection because of one girl's rejection. Oh, but wait, that was just the wound that revealed the rejection of my dad when I would say, hey, Dad, can we play catch? And you'd say, no, I'm too tired from working all day. You know what I mean? So I had all this rejection that made me so fearful to even ask the girl out for the first time. And then when she rejected it, it was like, okay, now I'm done forever. You know what I mean? So it wasn't just the one rejection that I thought it was, but and all those things have taught me so much about who I am and why I am the way that I am. And so for me, data, gifts, they're gifts.
Can be.
You know what I mean?
If you transfer that data from
if you learn
heaviness to light,
right.
yeah.
Right.
You've become the hummingbird and extracted the nectar.
The nectar, the path of the hummingbird.
That's beautiful.
Very powerful. Yeah. So, Jim, what's your plans? What do you want to do now? What do you want to happen? What's the next phase of your journey? Do you have any visions? Do you have any ideas? Do you have any plans? Do you have any feelings? What do you want?
Nothing.
What do you really want?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing.
That's a good question. What is it that I really want?
Right, and that's where I mean, I want the answer to be nothing. Because I think for want is desire. Desire can lead to other things, and So I want to be perfectly content, because right now what I want is to enjoy this beautiful time with two beautiful friends that I've made over the last few months, and to have a beautiful conversation together while I'm here. Nothing else exists. There's nothing after this. Now I know later tonight I'm going to see you again. We're doing breath work tonight, and that should be fun. But I don't want anything from that yet. And when I'm there, I'll want something out of that experience. And all that sounds great, but it's not. I don't know if that's real or not to me yet. It's what I want to be. But like I said, I don't know. And I've spent, in my time as a pastor, I've spent so much time wanting something. And so one of the things I would always tell Rob, I said, man, I just need to get people that were like willing to like support me on like Patreon or something like that, so that way I can earn a living. I can just do whatever I want whenever I want to do it. But I'm earning a living. I'm putting out content or whatever. And finally he was like, dude, stop. Like, you have that. You literally have people who are paying your salary, and you have nothing to do throughout the week. You got to show up on Sunday and talk for 30 minutes. He goes, you literally have the thing that you're saying you want. And you're angry and you're upset and you're depressed that you don't have it. And I was like, oh. I'm
not paying attention.
I'm not realizing that I have the thing I've always wanted.
You always do.
And, so for me, it's, I really, really love being a husband. 17 years on Saturday that I've been married. I love being a father. And those are the first and foremost things to me, is just being able to continue to be what my children need me to be, continue to be what my wife needs me to be, continue to foster my kids' interests. I was kind of disappointed because I really wanted my son to wrestle. I started wrestling in kindergarten, and so his kindergarten year there was no wrestling because of COVID and stuff. And then so like last year, wrestling was getting ready to start back up, and friends of mine that I wrestled with all the way through school, they do like a wrestling club, now that they have like a wrestling gym, and it's for youth. And so I was going to sign my son up for it, and he didn't want to do it. He wanted to play basketball. I'm like, you're going to be a wrestler. You're going to wrestle. And he's like an elite basketball player. He's 7 years old, and he's being recruited for AAU team, like literally elite. Like when he plays against kids his own age, they asked him not to do that league anymore because he was so much better. He had to put him in a third and fourth grade league when he was in first grade. And I'm like, man, and I would have, if I wouldn't have been more of like the dad that just do what you want to do and I'm going to support you, I would have made him wrestle, and he would have missed out on this thing that he had amazing natural talent for. And so that's taught me a lesson, is just finding what my kids, what are their interests, what do they want, what are their gifts, and then supporting that. And that's my first and foremost priority. And anything is just helping my kids get to a level that they want to get to. And then professionally, what am I looking for out of the church? I'm really not. And it's, the church was supposed to close in August of 2022. In August of 2022, we ran out of money. And for some reason, we're not running out of money. Like it's literally like a loaves and fishes story out of the Bible.
Right.
More is going out than's coming in, but what we have
how's
on
it
hand,
happening?
But
right.
what we have on hand isn't getting lower.
Right.
But more is going out every month than what's coming in. And we were running out in August of 2022. And here we are in August of 2023, and we're still open. And I'm still getting a paycheck, haven't gotten a pay cut, nothing. Mm-hmm. So, for me, that's just telling me a story of
keep going.
All my effort and all my energy into trying to close the church, trying to kill it, trying to make it be something else, all of it. I can't kill it. I can't grow it. I can't do anything. All I can do is just show up and be a part of it. And, I know we've had conversations about like breath work and what am I doing to kind of help grow that. And that's where I struggle, because anything I put effort in, anything I've tried to manifest has always never worked out. Anything that I didn't do anything for, and this is what I tell people, the story of my life is hard work doesn't pay off.
Yeah, that's blockage.
Because everything...
That's trauma.
Well, all I know is everything that I've earned, everything that I have...
will come to you, right, with joy and ease.
It just comes. Mm-hmm. And anything that I work for, anything I put effort in, anything that I try to build fails.
Well, that's me building. So anything me tries to build may fail. Me, I will always succeed.
Right. So for me, it's all about just being open. Because once again, I'm not averse to working hard. but I'm going to work hard when I feel pulled into something. And so right now it's just kind of waiting and just kind of doing what I feel called to do, going where I feel called to go, flowing with the flow. And my main objective is to not do anything that's going to disrupt the flow. Because as long as I stay in the flow, everything that's supposed to happen happens.
Sure.
When I try to disrupt the flow, I stop things from happening that are
well, right, because what I would point out is trying to change things, all the change being external. The biggest change, and what I teach everyone is the biggest change in the world is going to come through here. Right. Through the connection to you. And you're doing that. You're doing that. You've started to change the way things are going. You've lost a bunch of, how much weight you lose now?
I think close to 50 pounds.
That's a lot of weight, man.
That's a lot of weight.
That's a lot of weight. That's a couple sacks of potatoes, man. And whoop, gone. So that creates energy flow in your body, in your mind, all these things. What else? You still doing cold immersions?
Yeah. I mean, I'm in cold shower, and I haven't done a cold plunge yet. That's.
You're ready? We got a couple of them coming.
We're ready. Yeah. You do them on Sundays, man, or Saturdays, and Saturdays that's hard. That's family time.
Sunday
well, either you want it or you don't.
I know.
That's how it goes.
First
but we can create anything. We can make anything happen.
What you need to do is you need to get that freezer fixed. I can just come to your house on a Tuesday afternoon and do it while the kids are at school.
Give me the money. I'll do it.
You didn't oversleep the other day.
Send me the dough. I'll take care of it.
You didn't oversleep last Friday.
Yeah.
He wasn't sleeping. He was sitting there like, I'm not getting in a cold tub.
All of a sudden, I woke up. And I'm like, oh, man, I got to get going. I got to get there. And I looked at the clock. It was 8:30. I'm like, oh, man. Yeah, I ain't going to.
It was great. It was a great little circle and good conversation.
So hopefully next Friday or this Friday. That's every Friday, right?
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to do it this Friday.
Possibly. I may not. Oh, no.
Yeah.
You know me, planning time. Nah.
Right, yeah. We'll talk to Mary.
Yeah, you're going to have to talk to Mary. I don't even know what day it is.
Wednesday.
I know that. Which is odd because we usually don't do a podcast on Wednesdays, but we are this week.
Yeah, that's fun.
Which is good. It's perfect. It's perfecto.
But yeah, so I think to kind of go back, your thing, it's right now, right, yeah, I want to keep just doing the work that I'm doing. Which is, being a husband and a father, but it's also getting myself healthier, living a healthier lifestyle, continuing my meditation practices, what I do. And it's just, living in a place of just being in the moment and knowing that, like, my bill's going to be paid. You know what I mean? I'm going to be okay.
It's always going to be okay.
Right. There's nothing to be afraid of. And
that's faith.
When I know, Dave, you caught me on one of them days where I was just like, man, F this, I'm done. I quit. I'm going back to work. I'm plugging back into the matrix. This is, and it was just, that day that, just wasn't feeling it. And,
that's that heavy energy rising.
Well, yeah, it was just exhausting. Sometimes it's just, you look at the people who are in the matrix, you know what I mean? And you're just like, man, that guy never asks a question about anything. That guy never wonders. He just wakes up every day, goes to work, comes home, drinks a 6-pack of beer. God, that must suck. But God, that must be nice. You know what I mean?
No. I get what you're saying, but no.
To live in our space, it does require a lot, and it does require a lot of sacrifice. You know what I mean? It requires a lot of, like, we've all lost friends. You know what I mean? We've all lost contact with people who meant something to us, but they just you know what I mean? And so there are sacrifices that come with living this way.
Yeah.
For me, the benefits of living this way far outweigh the benefits of being in the matrix.
Oh yeah.
The negatives of living in the matrix far outweigh the negatives of living in
I don't see any negatives anymore, so I guess that's why it doesn't work. It's all one beauty.
There's always got to be corrected. You know what I mean? Though? You know what I mean? Like there's just certain things that, like I said, certain sacrifices that we might have to make. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to get financially rich doing this kind of work. You know what I mean? You might
you're doing.
Well, you might find that billionaire donor that really believes in you and cuts you a big check, but for the most part,
or work with thousands of people that give you little bits.
But what I'm saying is, like, you're going to be able to live.
Oh yeah,
you're going to survive. You're going to sustain. You know what I mean? And that's what else do I need? You know what I mean? Do you really need?
I want to create as much abundance as possible to help other people.
But abundance.
Other than that, I don't care.
But abundance of what? You know what I mean?
All things.
I would much rather create an abundance of love than
all
abundance
things.
of wealth.
I don't think abundance is limited to all these specific things. I think it's an overall. Again, I kind of see things generally from a frequency of consciousness. If I feel the vibration and frequency of abundance within me, I'm abundance and don't need any material.
Right.
So that's the abundance. I want to create all kinds of things. Well, right now, I guess the primary creation is I'm doing a lot of work and manifestation to bring funding to create our first healing facility, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that's going to happen, what it's going to look like, all those things, but it's getting closer and closer. It's getting closer and closer. I can feel the event horizon coming closer and closer. And then when that happens, that allows me to be able to open up things. I'm also doing a bunch of shamanic training, teaching other people how to do and apply this energy and mindset that I'm using. So then that way I don't have to be here. Because I want to go off and live in the mountain. I don't want anything. I want to live in without is possible.
Right.
I want to just live as free and natural as possible, like a loincloth in the jungle.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
A canopy up in a tree to keep you off the ground, and fire to cook your scroll.
That's I feel like every day, there's times where the ego mind gets involved and a lack mindset comes up. Like, do I have enough? Is there enough? And then I just kind of watch that, and then I let the Christ mind kind of come in place. Like, you already have everything you need and always have.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. You get that idea of like, sometimes it feels like I'm not going to be able to sustain myself here, so I got to go back. And it's like, dude, I
never going.
I'll tell this quick story. So 2009 when I quit my job. So 2008, I think that year on my taxes, I think I claimed $56,000 of income between the National Guard and the restaurant, right? And so then I quit my job in 2009, and all I had was the National Guard, which was like $200 a month. And we had no idea how we were going to pay our bills. Like, I got a part-time job working at Outback as like a waiter, like Thursdays and Friday nights, and make a couple $100 there. But there was a month where we were $1,200 short on our bills, like $1,200. And my wife was like, "What are we going to do?" I'm like, "I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out." A buddy of mine calls me from the National Guard, and he goes, "Hey man, did you ever sign up for this bonus?" I'm like, "What bonus?" He goes, "Well, there's this bonus for any Ohio resident who served in Iraq gets this bonus." I'm like, "Well, what's the bonus?" He goes, "It's $300 a month for every month." Whatever, maybe I think it's $700. I forget exactly how the numbers worked. Right, yeah, it's $1,200 I was short. Yeah, and it was $300 a month, and I was in Iraq for 4 months. So I got this bonus for $1,200, literally the exact amount that we needed. You know what I mean? And then there's another month where I was like $500-$600 short on our bills for that month, and the same guy called me and goes, "Hey man, did you get this bonus?" I'm like, "What's this bonus?" He goes, "Anybody who's in the Army after 9/11 gets such and such money," and it was the exact amount that we were short that month. That happened 3 times that year. You know what I mean? So that's why I was like, I'm good. You know what I mean? And so now when I get that mindset, I'm like, bro, you've been way worse and you've been just fine. You know what I mean? So for me, it's not necessarily a financial thing. There is just sometimes it gets frustrating dealing with people. It gets frustrating just having to not always have I don't know how to put it, but there's just certain frustrations that can come along, and they don't last long. I think you were kind of worried about me for a little bit. I'm like, no, bro, that was just that day. You know what I mean? It was just that few hours, and you know what I mean. And so because you process it, you know what I mean. We're doing our practices, we're doing our meditation.
The challenge arises so you can grow. Right,
and so but so as for what I want, and so that for me is when I think about what I want, what I'm trying to do, where I'm trying to go. There really isn't an answer, because if it's not end up being what I want, then I end up getting some sort of frustration or disappointment. So for me, it's just I'm going to be in the flow. And when somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I met this shaman and he's really weird and you're kind of weird too, and I think you guys should meet," I'm like, "Okay, I'll meet him." You know what I mean? Like, because I'm not You know what I mean? And now we've met, and then you're like, hey, I know this guy. He's a manifester, and he owns this business. He's got this great kava bar. You should meet him. I'm like, okay, I'll meet him. You know what I mean? So I met David, and so, you know, I'm not ever going to say no. You know, so when David called, you know, and says, hey man, what are you doing? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow. You know, I know I got to go to my sister's house today and finish some drywall and put some tile on her bathtub. And then I got breath work tonight. So other than that, I don't know. I got none. Well, do you want to do a podcast? Yeah. What do you know? My wife was like, "What are you guys going to talk about?" I'm like, "I have no idea." She's like, "Well, shouldn't you know like what they're going to ask?" I'm like, "I don't know."
That's not how we work.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I know you guys well enough to know that there's no real format.
No script here.
But right. But like that's just for my mentality. What I tell people is my answer is always yes. When the phone rings, hey, can you? Yes. Hey, do you want it? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because for whatever reason, that opportunity is there. So I'm not seeking anything out, but I'm not going to say no to anything that comes into my flow.
Just say yes. Keep hanging out with me. I'm going to change the world. We are.
So,
we're doing it.
You know, I've been saying that for a long time.
Well, we're doing it.
Yeah.
It's already happened. I'm not saying it. I'm doing it.
Right. But
we're doing it.
I was having a conversation one time with a group of Quakers. I do this Quaker Zoom call every other Sunday, and it's really fun. And we were talking about kindness, and I was kind of on this rant, like I'm not kind. Like I'm not a very kind person. I'm not very considerate and kind. And I said, but my way of kindness is that I always say yes. Somebody calls me and they need help, the answer is yes. Somebody wants something, the answer is yes. But I'm not going to go out of my way to look for something or to try to help somebody. But if they ask for it and they want it, the answer is yes. And so that's just kind of been my mantra is yes. Whatever
shows up is supposed to be here.
God wants, the creator, universe, source, whatever. I don't care what you want to call it. Whatever wants to bring to me, the answer is yes.
Even if it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
Especially if it's uncomfortable. Yeah.
If it's going to trigger me and make me angry and want to cuss at you, I want it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It'll show me who I am.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I'm going to get mad at you in the moment. I'm going to get frustrated. But later on, I'm like, oh, man, that dude was right. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I want all of it. And but at the time being for me, I'm not trying to build anything. I'm not trying to go anywhere. I know we're going to change the world. I don't know how. I don't know when.
It's now.
But there's
only now.
And that's the thing. There only is.
It only happens now. Whatever you're doing now is what will create the potentials of outcome.
Right. I just remember future. It was like 2012, maybe even 11. And I was preaching a sermon, and I said, a small church of 30 people in Grafton, Ohio can change the world.
It can.
And everybody kind of looked at me, and then I had to change it there for a minute, 'cause then it became a church of 20 people in Grafton, Ohio can change the world, and then it became a church of 20 people in Grafton, Ohio is changing the world. Because the reality is it was always going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't need something great to change the world. Main thing we need is love each other.
We need our connection to our Christic mind, our Christ light. Right. That's the primary source of all that drives us and what we're meant to do.
Mm-hmm. And
ever since I stepped into that way of being, my whole life has changed. I've recovered from terminal illness and depression and anxiety and all these things. Hell.
Right.
I've been saved, and I have no shame in saying
in the name of Jesus.
I would say that. I mean, I told you about the story about the painting that found me in the garbage and all these things, and I will definitely say that Jesus has definitely been crucial in my change. Wildly, and then even deeper connection. Jesus taught me how to connect to Christ.
Right.
Beautiful.
And that's the important part, and I think that's what a lot of the foundational Christians kind of lack. It's Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
We build the worship Jesus. We sing about Jesus. We praise Jesus. I just want Jesus in my heart, and they said, well, that's fine. You can have Jesus in your heart, but I want Christ in me.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was just a guy. He was just a carpenter.
Now I observe him as a spirit.
Right.
He's a living spirit.
So
still a teacher, still teaching us. That's the amazing part is we're still being taught and receiving the gifts.
2,000 years later, and those stories still resonate.
Yeah. And there were similar stories 2,000 years before those.
Right.
So it's a repeating cycle. It's a beautiful thing.
Never ends.
Over and over.
It's beautiful. How much time? Where are we at? We probably should. I feel like we've been here for a while. We probably should cut this particular episode.
About an hour and a half.
But we definitely would want to see you come back as a recurring guest, talking about where we are now and where we end up, because that's the amazement of our stories is as they unfold.
As always, the answer is yes.
Yes.
2 Pacos and a pastor record a podcast.
Mm-hmm. 2 Pacos.
What could
two
go
priests
wrong?
and a pastor.
What could go wrong?
Nothing.
Nothing. Everything's perfect.
Only good. It'll only be beautiful, because it's always only beautiful.
That's what I mean, 2 Pacos and a pastor going to a gym. What could go wrong? 2 Pacos and a pastor.
You'll probably get a pump. Right. That's right.
Well,
what happens.
I think we should create a whole line of products. 2 Pacos and a pastor.
Barbecue sauce.
2 Pacos and a pastor kava. We can sell it at 7-Eleven. 2 Pacos and a pastor gym shirts.
Yeah. Soap.
Yes. Everything. Anything. Yeah.
See, there you go. You're creating.
Gosh darn it. I just said I wasn't going to do that.
That's what you want to do, actually, is manifest and create here first.
That
feel it
abundance
first.
to help
change the world. We need to create a proper flow. I mean, it's not that I agree at all in any sort of way with the current the way the economy works and all those things. I don't at all, but I understand completely that we have to become strong in this economy in order to facilitate change to go beyond it.
Well, there's a great lady that I love. Her name's Ilio Dilio. And Ilio Dilio, and she's a Catholic. She was actually she writes a lot about the cross section between Christianity and science. And she was a scientist, finishing up her PhD when she quit and joined a nunnery and became a nun. Mm-hmm. She's got a really fascinating story. But she has this book called The Unbearable Wholeness of Being. And it's incredible. It talks a lot about science, a lot of the Desjardins. She talks a lot about Teilhard de Chardin in that book, and a lot of his work she's commenting on. But she talks about this idea of, like, if we look at, like, the world in, like, a 50-year scope, things have gotten so much worse in the last 50 years. But if we look at it from a 500-year scope, everything is so much better. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to go through periods of time where we can say, or some people would say, well, things are getting worse. Mm-hmm. Or what I would say is things are getting ready to change. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it takes what those people would consider to be a worse time for us to realize, oh, we want to change. We want to grow. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I don't consider this to be a worse time. I don't think things are going bad.
No, I think it's amazingly perfect.
How corrupt the pharmaceutical industries are, how corrupt the government is. I don't think any of that's bad. Mm-hmm. I think all of it is part of the design to show us that, like, oh, we need a different way.
Things have to be deconstructed.
Right. And it's not going to be the way in which we can't go back and reform that system.
No, we create a new one.
Create a completely new system.
New birth.
And so that's always been my... I talk about it. I don't want to talk about this a whole lot on camera because it makes me sound crazy. But, like, I've always known that was going to be a part of my life. Mm-hmm. It's completely radically shifting and changing a total system.
This is the place to sound crazy. You're with shamans, and nothing's crazy to us.
Well, you know.
We understand there's a wide variety and awareness of perspective, because your perspective is what informs your reality. We're not experiencing the same reality. Each one of us is a universe experiencing itself. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. What came through when you were talking, one of my guides was pointing out to me that if you go deep enough into religion or science, you'll end up to God.
Oh, God, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure. The more I study, like, this in college, like, having to take, like, an intro to biology class. Like, the whole time I'm like, oh, my God, that's God. Oh, my God, that's God. Oh, my God, that's God. You know what I mean? And the more I've learned about, like, quantum physics, and I'm not,
right.
I'm not, but, like, you listen to a Joe Rogan podcast when he has somebody on and they're talking, and I'm like, oh,
that's God.
That's God. You know what I mean? Like, how do you, and so, like, that's the thing. I think, there's so much of religion trying to disprove science and science trying to disprove religion, and they're proving each other. You know what I mean? It's just,
as we always laugh, like, where Paco technically means nature mystic, and mysticism is being proven daily by quantum physics.
Right.
The things they knew thousands of years ago are exactly the things that were being
So
taught.
earlier, and I said I follow the contemplative Christian tradition.
Yeah.
You know what the people who follow contemplative Christian tradition are called?
Huh.
Mystics.
Mystics. That
When
makes
I
sense.
think about Thomas Merton, Richard Rohr, those names I mentioned, they're what we call mystics.
Mhm.
And they're
Mystic
people
is-
who embrace the mysteries of life. We're not
Right.
trying to solve them. We're embracing the mysteries.
Understanding it's
Right.
meant to be a mystery.
Right.
You'll never know it all.
You're
Not
never
here.
stuck.
Can't do it. All you can do is feel it, be with it, and love it.
Right.
Infinite journey.
Oh, I love the
without a
infinite journey.
destination.
And I like paddling in this boat with you guys. I love you guys. It's amazing. Jim, I'm going to ask you one last question before we jump out of here.
I feel like this is going to be a hard one.
Jim, the $500 question.
Wait, do I really get $500?
No. Well, you might, just not from us. Nothing's impossible. Sure. And I ask most people this question when they get to the end of the podcast, because I think it's important. What we're doing this for is to send out our message into the world. That's why we come here and we do this. This is coming through you. It's your channel into Source. So I want you just to relax for a few minutes while me and Dave do the commercials. But the question is, if you had one message for the world, what would it be? Okay. So I know it's difficult. To try not to contemplate, feel about it. All right. So let's do the commercials. Dave,
right.
Where are we? What is the name of this place?
We are at Sacred Waters Kava Bar in North Olmsted, Ohio, 30111 Lorraine Road, right across the street from a beautiful Catholic church.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And we are a very welcoming, loving community, open to all who seek it, as well as Moshi. We have our Moshi meetings here every Sunday around 1:30. Wonderful discussion, wonderful medicine. You can check us out on Facebook or Instagram at Moshi Love, or you can check us out on our website, moshilove.org, MOSHI love.org. More information about us there, our membership sign up, and we'll be posting more and more events that we'll be hosting, as well as on social media. So join us for some systemic healing and take it back out to everyone else.
Yeah, moshilove.org, the Ministry of Shamanic Healing and Integration. I recommend that you go over to the website and check that out. There are some writings there that are very cool. There's also some short films by one of our board members, Brain Dagger Films, Mo Taylor. You can check that out. Check us out at thepositivepineapple.org. We have lots of things going on. I'm currently teaching some shamanic practice trainings. Those are really cool. As Dave said, also with Moshi, we just had our first primary Moshi event, which was amazing. We did an outdoor healing circle where we brought a bunch of people together and we worked together to create that systemic healing through shamanic and energy practices. I think that's all I got to say. How about you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jim, let's get back to the question. If you had one message for the world, what would it be?
It's pretty simple, man. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Ah, I love it. Love thy neighbor.
But the key to that is first loving yourself.
Correct.
Can't love your neighbor if you know.
Yeah, how am I going to love you if I can't love me?
Right.
Right.
So it's learning how to self-love, learning how to remove all those blockages, remove all those lies, and recognize that you are divine light and that you are created in the most beautiful and splendid attire, and that there's nobody better than you, and you're pretty great. So love yourself. And then recognize that everybody else around you is the exact same.
I love you, brother. Amen.
Love you too.
Love you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You want to plug yourself and your church?
Grace Community Church, Grafton, Ohio, gccgrafton.org. Yeah, that's about it. I don't really have anything to plug.
And we do some events there. The Pineapple shows up there, and we do some events there twice a month. We do a donation-based breathwork and sound bath. It's in the big space there, so we can bring a lot of people. Bring your friends, bring your family. You want to learn about breathwork, how to breathe, come check us out. Breathe and be loved.
Yeah, good time.
Yes.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
We love you all so much. Love, peace, and chicken grease.
Bye.
This has been the Quantum Shamans presented by Moshi with David and Anthony. We look forward to seeing you next week for more insight into who you are and your place in the universe.